All right, we are live. Welcome. This is Orion Rising. I'm your host, Leonard O'Neill. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good morrow, depending on where in the world you are tuning into this show. All right, share this out, share this out, share this out. It's Friday night, Law of One. Welcome, everybody. Share this out, share this out. Let me pull down that overlay that I have up there on the screen. Got that overlay up there. Take that down. There we are. There's my ugly mug. All right, let me put me up in full screen here for right now. Today's Friday night. It is the Law of One. Welcome aboard, everybody. Okay. Like I said, share this out, share this out. If you're out there in the world and you're tuned in, say something in the chat. Otherwise, I just see numbers. That's all I see. Okay. It's Friday night. Like I said, Law of One. You can see we're up on the screen. We're actually on session number 97 this week. So we're getting close to being at the end of the Law of One. For those of you around the world listening on MP3 broadcast, welcome. Welcome. Episode 97 or session 97 of the Law of One of 106. So it won't be too many more weeks and we'll be done with the Law of One completely for the second time. All right, guys, welcome. Okay, like I said, share this out, get everybody in here. Wait a minute, I need to get away from where I am here and go over into the chat so I can see people that are here. Brooke, welcome. Okay, so like I said, if you give me a shout out in the chat, otherwise I don't know you're here. And share this out, get some people in here. Okay, so it's the Law of One. We finished session 96 last week. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the session 97 of the Law of One. I don't think there's anything crazy going on. I think the full moon was just here. I didn't even look at that. I've been busy working, running around, doing things. So, okay. All right, guys, let me do a sound check. And you guys let me know that we're okay with the Law of One. And we'll just go ahead and get started on that instead of sitting around. Because like I said, I think I missed the full moon. I didn't even look at that. So I'm not sure what's going on. And we don't need to talk about any politics or anything like that. Denise, welcome. So we'll just do a sound check and start on session 97 of the Law of One. So let me pull that up into full screen there so that you guys can see it on your screen in full screen, right? So you can see there I'll do a sound check. You guys let me know if you can hear it okay, all right? So this is session 97, September 15th, 1982, the Law of One.
I am Ra. I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. We communicate now. Question 97.1. Questioner, could you first please give me the condition of the instrument? Answer, I am Ra. It is as previously stated. Question 97.2. Questioner, what is the situation with our fifth density negative friend? Answer, I am Ra. It is as previously stated. Question 97.3.
There's Rob being a little bit snarky again, right? Joanne, welcome. Saying, thank you for the sound check. Saying, it is as previously stated. I love how when Rob does that, he just dismisses, says no, or he says yes, or like that. But again, you see that Dawn is asking the questions about Carla and their fifth density assassin who's been trying to kill Carla the entire time. That they're channeling this. So for the 2.5 years, I think it was 81 to 84, but I think it was 83, late 83. I think it was early 84. Still, it was late 81 to early 84. That's crazy, trying to have somebody assassinate you the entire time, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and continue with this without wasting too much time, and then we can get into the actual questioning, right? When Ross stops being snarky. All right, so let's continue.
Questioner, I've been doing some consideration of the appearance of the hawk and have made this analysis of the birding card number 3. The bird is a message from the higher self, and the position of the wings on card 3, one pointing toward the female, indicates that it is a message to the female acting as catalyst for the mind. The position of the downward wing indicates that the message is of a negative nature or of a nature indicating the inappropriateness of certain mental activity or plans. Would Ra comment on that? Answer, I am Ra.
See, now remember here we started in detail talking about the tarot cards that Ra introduced into the this planet, 12,000 years ago in Egypt. And that's the reason that we have all of the tarot cards and the playing cards that we use. The playing cards with the numbers and the suits and all of that came out of the people who were using the tarot cards trying to hide when they made them illegal in certain countries, and the punishment was death if you were going and doing divination and anything that was outside of the norm to the religious cults at the time, right? So people started making playing cards, and they would pretend they were just playing card games, which, like Go Fish and a few other card games that are pretty simple and rudimentary. And then eventually people started actually inventing forms of gambling with the cards. And now we have the card games and gambling around the world with cards, and then many other card games that spawned from that. So crazily enough, that came out of that. So we're on card number 3, where Dawn's asking questions of Ra. So let's go ahead and continue him asking about the card number 3. I don't remember honestly if they do every single card in the 22 deck, but Dawn is pretty thorough, so he might. Right. However, this is a good time for those of you who are interested or know about the tarot cards to actually, Bo, welcome, Penny, welcome, to actually ask questions about tarot cards. Right. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue here.
No. Question 97.4. Questioner, is the reason for this lack of comment the first distortion? Answer, I am Ra. This is correct. Question 97.5. Questioner, I have analyzed the hawk that I saw immediately after returning from the house in Atlanta as a message, probably from my higher self, indicating that the plan of moving was not the best or not too appropriate, since, without the hawk, we would have continued as planned with no added catalyst. This single catalyst of a remarkable nature then, logically, from my point of view, could only mean that there was a message as to the inappropriateness of the plan for some reason yet to be discovered. Would Ra comment on that? Answer, I am Ra. We tread as close as possible to the law of confusion in suggesting that not all winged creatures have an archetypical meaning. We might suggest that the noticing of shared subjectively notable phenomena is common when, in another incarnational experience, work significant to the service of increased polarity has been shared. These subjectively interesting shared phenomena then act as a means of communication, the nature of which cannot be discussed by those outside of the shared incarnational experience without the interference with the free will of each entity involved in the complex of subjectively meaningful events.
Right, so you have to realize that there is a lot of symbolism in everything, especially in the ancient world. People, they don't really pay attention to that. Like, you see these drawings around the world depicting people with wings. So everyone's like, well, they must have been angels because they had wings and they could fly. And that's actually not what that symbology ever meant, unless they drew them as actual angels flying in the air with halos. Because the truth is that 90% of all of the people throughout history that were drawn with wings meant they had the ability to fly. It did not mean they had wings on their back and that they could fly. It meant that they flew in craft. They had the ability to fly from the sky and to land on Earth. They didn't always draw the actual craft that they used. However, you see that a lot with the Hindus over in India, drawing the Vimanas and the different spaceships that they drew, that they got from looking at the people. So you see them. Then you hear people talking about it like Quetzalcoatl, and some people think that Quetzalcoatl was a bird, but Quetzalcoatl rode on what they called a dragon that he flew in the sky in. So people don't realize what that would look like, because you have to realize for the people at the time, their reference is only what they know on Earth to be able to reference things. So when they're trying to figure out what a flying machine is, they've never seen it, it's completely foreign to them. Then all of a sudden they try to put it in terms of what they know as a bird or something like that. So it ends up getting depicted with bird wings because birds fly and they have wings. So they depict it that way, right? When you look at the description of Quetzalcoatl from Central America and Mexico area and South America, Quetzalcoatl, the way they describe the ship looks exactly like the modern aircraft, the modern fighter jet aircraft at night. It looks like a dragon facing backwards with flames coming out of its mouth, and it's flying backwards with shooting flames out of its mouth. they actually look like that. If you look at what a dragon would look like, and then you freeze it in the position of having wings, and then being able to see the jets flying out of the back. You can't see the fire flying out of the back in the daylight from any fighter aircraft, or any aircraft for that matter, and especially the fighter aircraft, because they actually have a blue flame that you can't see during the day, but at night, when the sun is down, the blue sky doesn't obscure that flame, and you can see the flame that comes out of it, and it looks like a frozen dragon flying in the air, shooting fire out of its mouth, going backwards, being propelled by that fire. So if we were to go back in time to the Aztec world, the Mayans and the Aztec, they would have saw us exactly in that manner, of being in a dragon, flying in a dragon, right? Chandra, welcome. Fiona, welcome. Cassie, welcome. So you have to realize that was a little bit different, more different than people realize. So when you see wings, and even on the cards, this is why Raw, when he answered with what he was asking, he even said not always do the wings mean an archetype when it comes to the chakras. It meant wisdom, like for instance Thoth the Atlantean. They depicted Thoth a lot of times with the head of a hooty bird. Right. And people assumed that they had Thoth had a bird head, and that he had a human body. And people say that a lot, where they had these animal heads, where they must have done surgery because they were aliens, and they were cutting off the torso and putting animal torsos on humans. That is worse than anecdotal. It is folly, because they didn't those depictions were of a typecast, of an archetype. Those were actually an archetype. So for Thoth the Atlantean, being depicted with a hooty bird as his head depicted wisdom. Okay, like we would say a wise old owl. So somebody being depicted with an owl head doesn't mean that they chopped off the body and it was an actual owl that was doing the thinking. But that's what people are thinking that are uneducated when it comes to the ancient times. And the same goes for seeing any figure drawn with wings on their back. Everybody immediately assumes they flew down here from space because they were angelic, and they came down with wings on their back and landed. And there has not been any depictions of anyone that they have said these people literally had wings and flew down out of the sky. They were saying they had the ability to fly, and most of the time they were in some sort of aircraft, some sort of spacecraft when they got here. That's been figured out by scholars, right? So you have to see that most of if people are not knowledgeable or not educated, and they're interpreting the past, they do the same thing. If you're looking at the past and you have no knowledge of the past, you're going to look at things through the eyes of what you can draw on as your memory or as your experience. And that's how you're going to try and describe things. So for instance, here, let's look at the North American continent in back in the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, all the way up till now. They looked up and they saw something in the sky that was round, and it was shaped like a saucer, which is a small plate that you would put a teacup on, or a coffee cup on. And so if it's turned upside down, that was the shape of it. So what did they say? A flying saucer, because it reminded them the only thing that they could describe that image of what that thing was a saucer-shaped craft. Again, that is people around the world trying to describe something and coming to the same conclusion that it looks like a saucer upside down. Or a frisbee. If you take a frisbee and you throw it upside down, it looks like that. So the same thing. So then there was this other craft that people see that are cylindrical and very dark, matte black, cylindrical with the abrupt edges on it, meaning that it looks like a cigar that someone cut the ends off of. So what do they say? They say that was a cigar-shaped aircraft or spacecraft that we saw in the sky. Okay, so now that's how we depict it. Again, the closest thing that we can come up with our little minds is a cigar with the ends cut off, and that's how we describe that. Then come forward in time to the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, and there was this spacecraft that was down in San Diego, flying around the military. And you guys have probably seen pictures if you've been on my page, or in my group, Ancient Aliens Worldwide on Facebook. You will see that we had the videos and the images that came from the Department of Defense and the U.S. Navy and the Air Force, showing all of that. And what did they call that? Well, it was round, and it was a slightly oblong and white shape that it looked just like the mint, a Tic Tac. So they call it the Tic Tac spacecraft. So again, we're describing things in terms of what it looks like with our description, based on what we know, based on our reality. So the same thing's going for everything, and that's where Dawn is asking a question about these wings, and he's applying it to the knowledge of, well, we've been talking about archetypes. These wings must depict an archetype. Ra's like, no, not everything that has wings is an actual archetype or representation of a chakra. It could just be something else and something for you to ponder. Usually it means flight or wisdom, and it's something that you have to interpret. So if you're a card reader and you read tarot cards, even if you don't do it for a living and you have multiple decks, you're used to doing that anyways, because the decks are all basically the same. They're all the same archetypes in the same exact order as any of the other archetypes, but they have different images on them with different names, depending on whether you're doing an angel deck or a fairy deck or a gnome deck or a whatever the deck is. They're all still the exact same archetypes. They're just going to have different images representing those archetypes. And Dawn doesn't understand that currently in his knowledge, because he's not a card reader. So he doesn't understand that stuff so much. And so he's asking questions about the images. Because he's a scientist, he wants to be very thorough. So it's not that he's coming and he's making assumptions. He's asking questions based, again, on his knowledge. We see the universe not for how it is. We see reality not for how it is. We see everything through the eyes of how we individually are. So we can only base all of our decisions on all of the culmination of all of our memory and experiences that we have as individuals. So you have to kind of take that into account when you're learning anything. When I was in philosophy, when I was in college, in Philosophy 101, the precursor to all philosophy, one of the things that I was taught by a monk, by the way, he was dressed up, in the whole brown monk outfit with a belt that was a rope tied around his waist, not a joke. He came, and I was actually a monk as well. Eventually being knighted by the church, and I have a picture of me somewhere. I'll have to find it, dressed up like Friar Tuck. So he literally was teaching that, and he was teaching us that to truly understand or understand the knowledge of philosophy or a philosophical thought or a religious thought or text or anything, you have to learn who the person was that wrote it in the time period that they wrote it, and know the time period that they wrote it to figure out the motivation behind what they're saying and the metaphors used or the descriptions used, because it's going to be completely 100% based on that person's memory and experiences at the time. So say when Nostradamus writes things in the 1500s in France, he's a Frenchman in France in the 1500s, and his references, except for when he's looking into the future, his references are going to be his references from his life in France at the time. His motivations are going to be the same. So you have to realize that. So when people are describing something, you have to learn those people and what motivated them to write that and what they were looking at the time, to fully, truly be able to understand exactly what someone is talking about at the time. This is the precursor to philosophical thought, is that you need to understand that philosophy, what that depicts, what that means. Some people say that philosophy is a Greek word that means the study of, say, a religion. It's not, or the study of knowledge, but it doesn't actually mean that. It was a concept word, and it meant, the philosophy literally meant the love of knowledge or the knowledge of love. Okay, so you have to realize that's how much the Greeks felt about knowledge. Knowledge to them was no different than love. love of knowledge, the knowledge of love. It meant the same thing. The learning of that was so important to them that they saw it as something that was created out of love. They didn't see it out of, everybody always looks at like Leonidas in the movies, and all they see is the warrior who's running out and killing and maiming like a Viking. And that's all they see. Why? Because that's being depicted that way by a modern group of people who want the Vikings to be warlike, the Greeks to be warlike, and that's the only part of the Greeks they teach, or the Vikings that they teach in the world today, in all societies. Why? Because you're growing up in a world-dominated societal structure that is a singular, monotheistic, religious-based, male-based God figure that is a warlike. Okay, and so you have that in Christianity, you have that in Judaism, you have that in Hinduism, you have that in Muslim. All of those are based out of the same ideology, and that's the biggest four religions on the face of the earth that makes up almost 3/4 of the population of the planet. They're all male-dominated, monotheistic religions that are masculine men, and all the women are, and the femininity is pushed aside. So you get a slant towards that when you start looking in a philosophical or religious text context. You start getting slant from those people in that direction because they're trying to keep everybody. It's the modus operandi of the Orion Crusaders. They're trying to keep everybody in a low vibrational pattern in your mind, and warlike. So that's why all the religions that are here today, most of them are male dominated, even the ones that are not. Okay. So Christianity was not, Jesus was not the male God dominated God. And they want you to believe that he wasn't even married to Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene was supposed to carry on the church. Mary Magdalene was supposed to be the veneration of the church itself and the feminine to help round out everything. They eliminated her and women from that religion, and then stormed into the south of France and murdered 2 million people to try to control that narrative. When Mary showed up there and started the spirituality, you can look that up in the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail. You can look that up in Dan Brown's book, The Da Vinci Code, which was based on in four different books: the Templar Knights, Marianer Knights, the Book of Mary Magdalene, and Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which was also based on all of those books and older books. So Dan Brown got a hold of those and wrote a what if story that became a what if movie that also talks about that. So it was the narrative is being pushed to shut up free-thinking women and keep that feminine, to keep that goddess energy, the love carrying energy out of the world. So they have to shut up women for doing that. So you have to realize the motivation. Here's my point. We'll get back on point. The motivation by these religions around the world. Now, remember, guys, I am a minister. I am ordained in 4 different religions. So it's not like I'm coming from an atheistical point of view, being angry at religion. But remember, in my book, I write in there, religion recruits you, spirituality waits for you to find it, right? So the spiritual path is the path that was supposed to be the path that everybody was supposed to be on in all these religions, and it was supposed to be rounded out, not male-dominated the way it is, right? So, but yeah, Cassie said Don is a scientist who's asking the questions to Ra. So, so you have to realize that he is a scientist, and that's why he's doing that, because he wants to get clarification to what's going on in there. And so it's nothing wrong with Dawn asking these questions, because you have to ask questions to make sure that you can fully round things out. And that's my point, right, of that. So let's get back. Let's go ahead and continue here.
Question 97.6. Questioner, can Ra tell us the source of the unusual odor in this room this morning? Answer, I am Ra. There are 2 components to this odor. One is, as has been surmised, the decomposing physics.
Yeah, Denise, because Denise was asking the question about, I'm always thought that it was Dawn. No, it was Dawn, D-O-N, Dawn. And and Carla is his wife, and she's the one that's actually channeling Ra. And so Dawn, and he's a nuclear physicist, he is the questioner. And then you have, I'm not sure who it is right now currently, that started out with Leonard, and then he left the group, and they got another guy that was the scribe, and I can't think of his name right now, who's actually writing everything down and recording everything. So Carla is the one who's channeling, and Dawn, D-O-N, is not Dawn, but Dawn, a man. He's the one asking the questions. Okay, let's continue.
Vehicle of one of your second density redentia. The second is an elemental which is attempting to take up residence within the putrefying remains of this small creature. The cleansing of the room and the burning of the incense has discouraged the elemental. The process of decomposition shall, in a short period of your space-time, remove the less than harmonious sensations provided for the nose. Question 97.7. Questioner: I find myself presently in a difficult position of decision, primarily because of the appearance of the aforementioned hawk upon our return from Atlanta. The only objective of any value at all is the work that we are doing, which includes not only the contact but communication and dissemination of this material to those who might request it. Since a move was connected with that, and since the hawk was, to me, obviously a function of that process, I am presently in a quandary with respect to the optimal situation, since I have not yet definitely decided on the significance of the hawk or the advantages or the efficaciousness of the move, and do not want to create any process which is basically irreversible if it is going to result in a lack of our ability to be of service to those who would seek that which we are able to manifest in our efforts. Would Ra comment on that situation? Answer: I am Ra. The questioner presumes much, and to comment is an infringement upon its free will. We may suggest the pondering of our previous comments regarding the winged creatures of which you speak. We repeat that any place of working, properly prepared by this group, is acceptable to Ra. The discrimination of choice is yours.
Welcome, Penny. I don't know if I said welcome to you. Welcome, Reese. Welcome, welcome. Let's continue here. If you guys are out there and you're listening and you don't say anything in the chat, I don't know you're here. I just see numbers. So if you want to say hi, I'll give you a shout out and tell the world your name, that you're in the audience. Otherwise, I just see numbers playing. All right, let's continue.
Question 97.8. Questioner: are there any items in the first 4 cards not of Ra's intention that we could remove to present a less confusing card as we make our new drawings? Answer: I am Ra. We find much material in this query which would constitute repetition. May we suggest rephrasing the query? Question 97.9. Questioner: possibly I didn't phrase that the way I meant to. We had already determined the items that should be removed from the first 4 cards, and my question was, had I missed anything that should be removed that was not of Ra's original intention?
Welcome, Cody. Hi. Wanted to say hi because you said hello in the chat. Wanted to make sure I mentioned you. All right, let's continue.
Answer: I am Ra. We shall repeat our opinion that there are several concepts which, in each image, are astrologically based. However, these concepts are not without merit within the concept complex intended by Ra, given the perception by the student of these concepts in an appropriate manner. We wish not to form that which may be considered by any mind, body, spirit complex to be a complete and infallible series of images. There is a substantial point to be made in this regard. We have been, with the questioner's aid, investigating the concept complexes of the great architecture of the archetypical mind. To more clearly grasp the nature, the process, and the purpose of archetypes, Ra provided a series of concept complexes. In no way whatsoever should we, as humble messengers of the one infinite creator, wish to place before the consideration of any mind, body, spirit complex which seeks its evolution the palest tint of the idea that these images are anything but a resource for working in the area of the development of the faith and the will. To put this into perspective, we must gaze then at the stunning mystery of the one infinite creator. The archetypical mind does not resolve any paradoxes or bring all into unity. This is not the property of any source which is of the third density.
See, so you have to realize that it was left for interpretation on purpose. However, if you have the archetypical mind, the mind to see the archetypes or to realize the archetypes, you will see that they're talking about the archetypes. And in that context, the archetypes would be those which are the chakra centers of the body, the major arcana, if you will, when you're talking about tarot cards. So in the tarot cards, you have the major arcana and the minor arcana. In your body, you have the major arcana, the 7 chakras, and the minor arcana, which are all the other chakras that are at every point in your body where you have like knuckles, anything that bends, wrists, elbows, shoulders, knees, ankles, hips, even your spinal column. Those are all minor chakras. Those are all minor arcana. So you have the major arcana and minor arcana. And so then in that with the 22, if you count that, you have 7, and then you have the other endocrine system, which is the major portions of like the limbs being, 2 legs, 2 arms, and the torso and things like that. And so if you do all the count, you can figure out the 22. So the major arcana and the minor arcana, but they're talking about the chakra centers and what they represent in there. So there was also some stuff that was supposed to stimulate your thought processes to get you to contemplate further, like we do with, say, 3 of swords or 3 of cups in some of the cards. Those were trying to get you to see the weight of how much of which major arcana or minor arcana energy that the card is based in, and how that either creates a positive or a negative outcome, to the messaging that you're supposed to be getting from the card reads, and that is supposed to help you. And that's what naturalists do when they're reading cards, and they pull them up, and then they tell you what that card means. And some people read you from the book what it means, and other people just do it from their own psychic abilities, from their own higher self, and they start interpreting that for the individual when they do card reads. So you're supposed to be doing that, and the person that you're supposed to be reading that to then is supposed to ponder those things that you're telling them, and that's supposed to stimulate growth, and that's supposed to stimulate the expansion of their consciousness as well as yours, to then assist you with your upward mobility in your ascension towards, or back towards, eventually the creator of the universe. So it's supposed to help enlighten you and help open up your mind and expand your consciousness by this process of you thinking about spending time on the archetypes and what they entail. So then there's interpretation, and then of course Ra explains that some of the cards that Dawn has the images have been changed slightly, and Ra talks about that to Dawn, where things did change. But in here, Dawn is asked that question, and Ra is answering with, telling you that, like these images, I'm reading, back again, what he said, these images are anything but a resource for working in the area of the development of the faith and the will. To put into perspective, we must gaze at the stunning mystery of the one infinite creator. So in that context, you're supposed to look upward. You're supposed to always look upward and look back towards and seek the creator of the universe. And that's where you see that in the Sistine Chapel, you see that hand of God reaching down, and the person reaching up, and their hands are almost touching. God is, and the creator of the universe is reaching halfway down, waiting for you to reach halfway up to the creator. The creator will meet you halfway. You have to make that trek. You have to look up. You have to move up. You have to ascend back to that halfway point, and then the creator will lift you up the rest of the way. That's why then he goes on to say the archetypical mind does not resolve any paradoxes or bring into unity. This is not the property of any source which is of the third density. Okay, so that is, again, it's supposed to be internalized in your inner being, in your beingness, not somewhere outward in the third density or third dimension, but within yourself and introspectively within yourself. Okay, so let's continue.
Therefore, may we ask the student to look up from inward working and behold the glory, the might, the majesty, the mystery, and the peace of oneness. Let no consideration of bird or beast, darkness or light, shape or shadow keep any which seeks from the central consideration of unity. We are not messengers of the complex. We bring the message of unity. In this perspective only may we affirm the value to the seeker of adepthood of the grasping, articulating, and use of this resource of the deep mind exemplified by the concept complex of the archetypes.
See, so again, you're supposed to look at this stuff and you're supposed to look at that perspective, right? So the message of unity in this perspective only may we affirm the value to the seeker of the adepthood of the grasping, right? So the grasping of these concepts, right? Articulating and use of this resource of the deep mind exemplified by the concept complex of the archetypes. So this was supposed to be a tool to aid people in the understanding or understanding of archetypes and looking in towards yourself. So again, introspective, not extrospective. So internalize, not externalize. And you're supposed to be doing this. You're supposed to learn that if you're in service to others, you learn that everything is within you. That the universe is even within you. You are not the thinking mind. You are not the pain body. If you are living in the flesh and you are self-serving, then you look at everything externally. Everything. This is your world. This is the world. That's all there is this place, 3D. And so the cards for those people, the tarot cards, the archetypes, it was a way to teach people what these archetypes were and what these chakras were and what they represented to your personage, to your beingness, to help guide you. We talked about this last week and the week before, to help guide you into your ascension and in introspectively looking at yourself and realizing that there is the lower chakras, which is the third dimensional plane, and the upper, the lower three and the upper three chakras, which is the spiritual plane of existence, and the heart chakra, which balances both and runs both. And that's the 7 chakras. And when you choose whether you're living in third dimension in service to self or living in fourth dimension in service to others, then you move into those categories of the ruling from those 3 chakras, either the lower 3 or the upper 3, respectively. And then the heart rules both. And that's the yin and the yang, the Vesica Pisces. That's where the crossover happens, where you see the white and the dark and the white. That's the heart. So if you put those together, that becomes the heart chakra superimposed over those major arcana. And that's what the cards were supposed to be teaching. And some people got it in different perspectives, in different interpretations around the world. And my book talks about that. Starting to show you that information, that all of the religions of the world were actually talking about the same things from a slightly different perspective, or their interpretation. Again, going back to the interpretive mind of reality, that our focus determines our reality. Our perspective focuses our reality to our perspective. And that's where you have the differences in these religions. And they're always semantical. The differences are always perspective from a particular people in that culture and how they want things to be done. And they also change the name of the god or the goddess or both to the gods and goddesses that they have, claiming that they're the right ones and the real ones. And then they claim everybody else is false. They do it to this day. So if you're a theologian, you know this, but if you're not, you don't realize that. So if you've taken courses or you've gone to a theological college, you start to realize that about religion. You start to realize that once they take a look at things, when they take it from a spiritual standpoint and then they move it into a religion, that's when they start adding their semantical reasons. You can't say God's name in vain. You can't draw a picture of God, or you can't say, you can't look at God. Those things could be punishable by death. And, Moses comes down from a mountaintop with 10 laws from God, and the Hebrews have 6,000 laws now. So the humans got involved and they started checking off other laws to control people the way that they wanted them to worship things in a certain perspective. So Jesus comes along 1,000 years later, 2,000 years later. Jesus shows up and he starts saying, you guys are missing the point. And they start telling Jesus, you can't say those things because it's the law. And that's, famously when they said that, and Jesus, they said, you can't say that's the law of Moses. And Jesus said, I am the law of Moses. Not because he was Moses, not because he was God who told Moses these things, but because he was sent by God to remind the people that you're missing the point completely into what's going on. You're supposed to be looking into from a spiritual standpoint, not a physical religious standpoint. And Jesus was trying to tell people that. So was Muhammad, so was Moses, so was Marduk, so was Thor. Every single person in every religion who is the savior character has been doing that. So you need to look at that. Most people don't know that. And that, let's segue to that. That is why Jamie, welcome. I didn't say hi to you when you popped in. That is why I wrote, my book talking about that. Right. So let's get into a commercial for my book real quick because you got to pay the bills. Right. So here's the reality about reality, returning to the old ways.
What is the reality about reality? Returning to the old ways. It is a comprehensive book about what is really going on here on this planet. It talks about the true spirituality that the controllers who think they own this planet have been keeping from you for thousands of years. It explains to you the knowledge that you gain from the universe itself when you live the way the prophets of the world throughout time told us how to live. Eat right, meditate, take care of yourself, treat others right. All the things they originally told us to do, but the controllers have removed from right in front of our eyes. The way to ascend to heaven. The reality about reality. Returning to the old ways. On sale worldwide online now.
Okay, so let's continue with the law of one.
Question 97.10. Questioner, thank you. Card number 5, the significator of the mind, indicates, firstly, as I see it, simply a male within a rectangularly structured form, which suggests to me that the significator of the mind in third density is well bounded within the illusion, as is also suggested by the fact that the base of the male is a rectangular form showing no ability for movement. Would Ra comment on that? Answer, I am Ra. O student, you have grasped the barest essence of the nature of the significator's complete envelopment within the rectangle. Consider for the self, O student, whether your thoughts can walk. The abilities of the most finely honed mentality shall not be known without the use of the physical vehicle which you call the body. Through the mouth the mind may speak. Through the limbs the mind may affect action. Question 97.11. Questioner, the entity looks to the left, indicating that the mind has the tendency to notice more easily catalyst of a negative essence. Would Ra comment on that observation? Answer, I am Ra. This is substantially correct.
All right, so you have to realize, again, the left-hand path and the right-hand path, and we talked about this last week, and I've talked about this many times. The left-hand path is the self-serving path. The right-hand path is the service to others path. That is why it is universal, and or it is that way because it's universal. People don't realize that when you get information from your higher self or your guides, you're always going to get it from the right-hand side. If you're getting information from the left-hand side, you need to be careful with that unless it is you that's doing it. Otherwise, it's going to be your ego that's doing it. It's going to be negative information or negative in stature. Nobody's the other way around, okay? Nobody is the other way around. Everyone says, well, I hear things all the time from the left-hand side. Well, you need to be careful of that, okay? Because it's universal. Nobody's backwards. It is universal. It's one of the things like the true knowledge, enlightenment from the universe is universal. So when you start ascending, you get to a point where the knowledge that you gain, either in service to self or in service to others, is the same knowledge that all other beings gain in those categories, being in service to self or in service to others. Okay, you don't get both. If you're in service to self, you start getting that package of knowledge opening up to you, self-serving. If you're in service to others, you get that knowledge opening up to you. You don't get both. There is nobody the people who say, well, I'm neutral. They're not really neutral. They're pretending they're neutral, and they're telling people that they're neutral because you can fool humans. The universe knows the difference. You can't fool the universe. The universe knows what you're doing and what you're really up to. You can't fool God. You can't fool the creator. No matter how much you want to try and fool yourself and say that. So there are certain things that are universal, whether people like them or not, whether people agree with me or not, doesn't matter, because eventually as you start to ascend one way or the other in service to others or in service to self, you're going to realize that is the way that it is, because that's the way it's been set up. It's not something that I made up. It's not something that I'm trying to interpret. It's something that everyone realizes at a certain time period in their development. It's just the way that it works. I would love to say that we could all just make up our own stuff, but the reason you're supposed to learn these things so that you know the difference between right and wrong, you know the difference between good and evil, you know the difference between light and dark. Those things are cut and dry on purpose so that you will know them going forward. And so in the physical sense, everything is open for interpretation because we have free will down here. But eventually you start to realize that things are a certain way in the universe, because that is the way that they were created by the creator. of the universe. So it's more linear than people think. It's you know what I mean? You have free will in certain areas, but then eventually that free will is guided one way or the other. But you still have the free will to interpret and experience things 100% individually. And that's the whole purpose within parameters. And that's the whole purpose of the creator, to try and then go crazy and learn all these new possibilities. That's why we are all individuals with our own ideology and our own way of interpreting. But eventually we all start to become more one-like. The closer we get back to the creator, the less individuality we have, and the more we start becoming the creator. And eventually we do then merge with the creator, and we lose our essence as an individual, and it goes into the collective of the creator itself. That's confusing from this perspective of beingness in the I am phase of your existence. It's as foreign as saying you don't need to breathe. Right. That's why they put that in the movie from The Matrix, when he said, "Do you think that's air you're breathing?" That's the whole purpose of that. Was what that lesson was about, was to expand your consciousness into the realization that this, what you think is reality, is actually not reality at all. Okay, let's continue here.
Question 97.12. Questioner, there are two small entities at the bottom, one black and one white. I will first ask Ra if this drawing is correct in the coloring. Is the black one in the proper position with respect to Ra's original drawings? Answer, I am Ra. That which you perceive as black was first red. Other than this difference, the beings in the concept complex are placed correctly. Question 97.13. Questioner, the red coloration is a mystery to me. We had originally decided that these represented the polarization of the mind. Would Ra comment on that? Answer, I am Ra. The indications of polarity are as presumed by the questioner. The symbolism of old for the left-hand path was the russet coloration. We shall pause at this time if the questioner will be patient. There are fairly serious difficulties with the instrument's throat. We shall attempt to ameliorate the situation and suggest the rewalking of the circle of one.
Right. Yeah. And it just kind of is that way, right? Chandra said reality is so weird. It is. But it's not. It's weird because we have an open-ended, a carte blanche, right? We have this open-ended. Let me put myself up in full screen for a second. We have this open-ended freedom to choose any avenue, any way that we want to have brand new experiences within the bounds of a certain organization to the universe itself, and it's done that way so that things become equal. Things have to be equal, so you have to have a balance. And the only way that you can do that is you have to have a closed circuit. You have to have a control mechanism that keeps things within a certain boundary so that nothing gets out of control. Meaning evil can't truly take over the universe. Meaning good can't truly take over the universe. There has to be a natural balance that happens. There's an ebb and flow to everything in the universe, a pendulum, if you will, where things will realign, and that's where you get chaos theory that played out in like the movie with the dinosaurs. I can't think of the name of it right this second, but the Jurassic Park, because in there you had Jeff Goldblum's character, who was a scientist, who was a considered sort of a radical thinker for back then in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. With the chaos theory. But the truth is, we know and have examples of that chaos theory playing out in the reality. And that's why the chaos theory started taking on a bigger role in science. But then they realized, when I was in physics, we were looking at that in the 90s and realizing it was scary because the theory was God rolled the dice with the universe. That literally people were thinking that God just kind of threw out their, randomality, but even randomality is organized in a weird way. And we're realizing that now. So when I was in physics in college, when we were looking at that, it was the chaos theory versus the non-randomality of the creator of the universe. And how can they both be the same thing at the same time? And people thought they were opposing points of view, that chaos theory was that there was complete randomity to things, and things could change. For instance, when in that movie where Jeff Goldblum's character was talking about, because we have this that happens, certain animals, fish, and a few others, where if they all have no male in the species that happens to be born, one of the females will spontaneously become a male. They'll change physically to be from a female to a male. The same in reverse. And that has played out, and we have seen that and witnessed that throughout the nature in this world that is our universe here on this planet. That is the case. So that's the idea of chaos theory, that things can change spontaneously, and it's put into the universal mind to do that. Another example of that was the bubonic plague, the Black Death in Europe, that took place when millions and millions of people in Europe died because that plague that literally infected the world at the time in Europe. Nobody had an immunity to it, and everybody was dying. Everyone was dying. More people died from that plague than even COVID. And then when you consider the per capita amount of people that died compared to the population at the time, it was completely catastrophic. It would be akin to all billion Chinese people dying in a 6-month time period. Not a joke. Okay. So what happened was, and they know this to be true now, what happened was, while that was going on, chaos theory, again, natural selection, you would think, and this is where they came up with theories like that, natural selection. What happened was the population of the people in Europe who were exposed to that bubonic plague spontaneously, overnight, all of the people changed, their physical body changed, and they were immune to the disease, and they passed that gene on to everyone that they, all their offspring. So, okay, that's not a joke. That's a proven fact. You can look it up. So they don't know what triggered that. And so chaos theory says it was needed to save the population. So there's something inherent in the universe that said the human population can't die off. Not from this. So something changed. People that, ancient aliens people want to say, well, aliens came down and did that. Yeah. Some of them say that aliens came down and tried to kill the people off. Right, the Grim Reaper came out of that. You should look up that. So there was something that happened spontaneously that saved the human race at that time from a disease that was created spontaneously. Other things happen spontaneously. Ra has talked about that. If an alien force comes down to Earth physically in spacecraft, then literally the population of the earth, even the people that are evil who hate the rest of the population, or even people that are at war with each other, will then realign together to defeat somebody that is coming to invade. Even people who hate each other and that are at war with each other, they'll stop. They'll realign with each other to change the course of history. Why? No one understands how that happens or why it happens, but it is a dynamic that does actually happen. So you have to realize that again goes to the viewer created reality. That again goes to the idea of things being already ordered on some level. So the universe itself is really weird. Getting back to what Chandra said, it is very weird. It's very chaotic, right? Thank you, Penny. Penny noticed, she just saw that I put the books up here. I didn't do that. Brooke did that. I thank her for that. She's in the other room listening to the show. Brooke put those up there for me. She said, why don't we have these books up here? I said, I don't know. Let's do that. So she did that and made sure that I was sitting at the right place here to make sure that the books were up on the shelf behind me that you guys can see. So, and I'm like, why didn't I do that last year when I published the book? I don't know. Maybe Brooke wasn't in my life because she wasn't back then to say, hey, why don't you have the books up there? Okay. So, but thank you, Penny. For those of you listening on the MP3 broadcast, you guys can't see that because you guys don't, in fact, have the video. You can just hear my voice, right? Organized chaos, Jamie. Yes. So it's really weird that the universe is, and that's where it kind of blows both of those theories out of the water of the chaos theory and the organization or the Darwinian effect. If you know anything about Darwin, it kind of throws all that out. So you can't have one side without the other is the point that we were getting at. Like you can't have the You can't have the yin without the yang. You can't have the light without the dark. You can't have right without left. You can't have left without right. You can't have up without down. You have to have those things. You have to have good and evil. You have to have light and darkness. So that means you have to have chaos and order at the same time. So it's an ordered chaos or a chaotic order, right? So the yin and the yang becomes the Vesica Pisces, which is the circle that has the center that is together. The yin and the yang is that. The dark is in the light and the light is in the dark. That is, if you turn it upright, up and down, that is the chakras. The upper three chakras and the lower three chakras are the two circles, bottom three chakras, top three chakras. And then when you line them this way and you put them together, the seventh chakra or the sixth chakra that is here, which when some people would, if you count it, is the fourth chakra, but it's actually number 6 because the first chakra is actually the number 3. But we won't get into that. That is in my book, and I'm covering that in my next book that I'm writing currently. But that you can read that from Thoth in Thoth the Atlantean, from the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, where Thoth talks about those gods that rule the archetypes, and their names are 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's 3 through 9, not 1 through 7. But the overlapping is the heart chakra. The heart chakra rules the upper 3 and the lower 3, depending on where you exist, either living in the flesh in service to self or living in the spirit in service to others. So the universe reacts the same way from these archetypes. And so there's this weird order and weird chaos at the same time. And that's where you get like the ebb and flow of a river that if you look at it from the top down from space, it sort of looks like it's just easily moving through things. And the closer you get to the river itself, the more you realize how jagged the surface is that the river is flowing through, but how it's not jagged at the same time. So that's where you get your fractions and fractals, which is the yin and the yang, which is the visual and spiritual portion, the flesh and the spiritual portion of reality itself. And they're starting to realize that in science now with fractals, and how beautiful the spirals are in the fractal area, which is the feminine energy, which is the spiritual energy. So if you look at a landscape, you have both happening at the same time. This order, this beautiful order to like a tree trunk being round, or but then at the same time, the tree has this leaf that is very sharp or jagged. So you have both this chaos and this order at the same time that happens in the universe that makes the universe a beautiful place and rounds that out, because you have that in all aspects of everything. The golden mean ratio, as opposed to the Fibonacci sequence. The Fibonacci sequence is the squares and the triangles, the sharp edges, and then the golden mean ratio is that arc that is that beautiful spiral that goes around the outside edge of those things. That is the difference between masculine and feminine energy, the Kundalini and the Kunda buffer energy in the universe. The knot, the Celtic knot work, which is 2 energies, man and female, masculine and feminine, Kundalini, Kunda buffer, Kundalini being masculine, Kunda buffer being feminine. That is in everything in the universe. And once you start to realize that, the order to the chaos, or the chaos to the order, the love of knowledge or the knowledge of love, becomes synonymous with all of that in working together. Okay, let's continue. Let me get back here, put this up into full screen, and let's continue with the law of one.
The circle of one was rewalked and breath expelled 2 feet above the instrument's head. Question 97.14 answer, I am Ra. Please continue. Question 97.15. Questioner, what was the nature of the problem? Answer, I am Ra. The 5th density entity which greets this instrument affected a previous difficulty distorting the throat and chest area of the instrument. Some fraction of this distortion remained unmentioned by the instrument. It is helpful if the instrument speaks as clearly as possible to the support group of any difficulties that more care may be taken. However, we find very little distortion left in the chest area of the instrument. However, immediately preceding the working, the instrument was offered an extreme activation of what you may call the allergies, and the mucus from the flow which this distortion causes began to cause difficulty to the throat. At this juncture, the previous potential for the tightening of the throat was somewhat activated by reflex of the yellow ray, chemical body over which we have only gross control. We would appreciate you reminding us to cause this instrument to cough before or after each query for the remainder of this working. Once conscious, this instrument should have no serious difficulty. Question 97.16. Questioner: I was wondering why the dark entity was on the right side of the card in relation to the significator. Could Ra comment on that after making the instrument cough? Ra, cough, the nature of, we pause. 10-second pause. I am Ra. There was a serious pain flare. We may now continue. The nature of polarity is interesting in that those experiences offered to the significator as positive frequently become recorded as productive of biases which may be seen to be negative, whereas the fruit of those experiences apparently negative is frequently found to be helpful in the development of the service to others bias. As this is perhaps the guiding characteristic of that which the mind processes and records, these symbols of polarity have thusly been placed. You may note that the hands of the central image indicate the appropriate bias for right and left hand working, that is, the right hand gestures in service to others, offering its light outward. The left hand attempts to absorb the power of the spirit and point it for its use alone.
So you have to realize that even visually, when you're looking at cards that are put together, tarot cards, you should be paying attention to the image that you're seeing and the direction that the image is looking, hands. So now let's go to Leonardo da Vinci with the painting of the Last Supper, and you have one of the characters in there with the hand held up. Maybe I should put my camera back on so you can see the images, and I'll try to describe it for those people that are on the MP3 broadcast. So you have the person looking at Jesus with the hand up, pointing up to God. And, so you have that one finger pointing up, and people are going, what does that mean? They don't understand that, but that became synonymous with the John the Baptist doing that, and the Baptist religion going back to John. And so some people interpreted the Last Supper as if that Leonardo was trying to say that John was the true Savior, not Jesus, and that John, who baptized Jesus, because he baptized Jesus, he was the Savior and he baptized Jesus. So therefore, he was the catalyst. He was the true Savior and not Jesus. And his sacrifice when Herod had his head cut off was the true sacrifice. And that's why you have that religion that came out of that. The Baptist religion came out of that, and they believed that John was in fact the Savior. In the truth, that neither could have been without the other. They were actually cousins. John was actually Jesus's cousin. They were first cousins. People don't realize that, but they were. And it had to happen exactly the way that it did for that to be solidified, because Jesus had to have been chronicled, had to have been talked about prior, and John did that, talking about the coming of Jesus, then baptized Jesus, and that was the symbolic baptizing of John or by John, and that is the symbolic oil within you, the Christ oil within you, being baptized of John, not by John, but of John, and John being the illumination. And that's where the Baptists went further with that and said that John was the actual illumination. But then Jesus, after he's crucified, after he's baptized by John or of John, is then crucified, dies, and 2.5 days later, or the third day, rises from the dead. And that's where the Christ oil is crucified in the brain as it's laying dormant, but it's baptized of John, and it's now merging the masculine and feminine energies of the Kundalini Kunda buffer after it is charged from the chakras, going back up the chimney, the claustrum, where we get Santa Claus from, claustrum, claws, going back up there. And then when it hits the third eye, the optic thalamus, it then explodes with DMT into your brain, and it illuminates. That's Christ becoming the light of the world. It illuminates all of your brain cells and raises your vibration. Or you eat of the tree of life in that time period, and then there's this coal-like substance that oil turns into, which lowers your vibration. And that's where you get the Santa Claus story of if you're good for goodness sake, meaning in service to others, Santa rewards you with a present, the illumination. That's the chimney. The chimney going up and down the chimney is going through the claustrum. It's also the Kundalini Kunda buffer energy that is going up and down your spine. It's the sword and the stone, by the way, that King Arthur drew. The stone is the lower part of your vertebrae in your back that is fused, and the spine is the Excalibur, and the Excalibur was in there in the stone, and only those who can draw the stone are those that are pure of heart, can draw the sword out of the stone, which is drawing the oil out of the stone, which is where the oil goes to mix together, is down in that base in your spine, and then it comes back up. And those who are pure of heart then get illuminated. That's where the whole story of King Arthur comes from as well. It comes from the same sacrifice and learning of the Christ oil within yourself and being a good person and in service to others and becoming illuminated. Then you become king-like and you become more illuminated and more upright. And that's what all of that is all about in all of the religions. Or you have the opposite, which is the living in the flesh and the like. Okay, so let me put this back up in full screen. And so you have to realize that you're supposed to be pondering that and moving into that understanding or understanding, and all the religions are the same. Even with Thor being, the prayer to Thor is, Thor, use your hammer to crack the sky. And his hammer of war is Mjolnir, which means lightning, and Thor means thunder. So the god of thunder and lightning, that means illumination, that means knowledge. And he uses his lightning to crack the sky, and that lightning that strikes the sky scares off Fenrir the wolf. And Fenrir the wolf is the darkness, the veiling that you have over your beingness. And Thor then cracks the sky, chases off Fenrir the wolf, and illuminates you and becomes the light of the world, just like Jesus, just like John, just like all these other characters throughout history. If you look at theology from the standpoint of spirituality, not from the standpoint of what book that they're in or what laws they have. So even as a theologian, theologians need to look at religion from the standpoint of spirituality, not religion. If you look at things from the religious standpoint, then it's a physicality standpoint, and that becomes semantical. If you're looking at the spiritual message that was being taught, that is the upper three chakras in service to others, and the point of that, and that's where the knowledge comes from. So you have to realize that in and of itself. But most theologians just look at things from a physical standpoint because they're more scientists than they are anything else, and they're afraid to do anything spiritual because they're afraid people are going to say, you're taking this entire knowledge and slanting it towards your religion. That's the problem that most people have, is that they try to slant all of this learning towards a religion, which is a physical plane organization that is actually a corporation and is a company that's trying to make money and conquer the world, no different than a McDonald's, a Taco Bell, or a Walmart is trying to open stores on every corner. The churches are doing the same thing. They're corporations. They're not spiritual outlets. And, I'm sure that the churches will get very mad at me for saying that, but they're missing the message of all of the greatest minds in the history of the planet that were teaching spirituality, not religion. There is not one person who was teaching spirituality or a spiritual way who wanted their knowledge and path to become a religion. None of them. Jesus did not. Lao Tzu did not. The Buddha did not. Moses did not. None of the people that are quoted by religions as them starting the religion and why they started the religion ever wanted their knowledge or their physical way or their spiritual way to become a religion. None of them did. So what is the common denominator there? The common denominator there is literally that. None of them wanted their way, like the Tao Te Ching, the book of the way. They didn't want that way to become a religion. They wanted it to be a way of life, not a religion that you're supposed to be following laws on. It's a way of life that is a guideline to help you expand your consciousness. All right, let's continue.
Question 97.17. Questioner, the 8 Carthages at the bottom would possibly signify the energy centers and the evolution through those centers with the possibility for positive or negative polarization because of the white and black coloration of the figures. Would Ra comment on that after making the instrument cough? Ra, Kof, I am Ra. The observations of the student are perceptive. It is informative to continue the study of octaves in association with this concept complex. Many are the octaves of a mind, body, spirit complex as beingness. There is not one that does not profit from being pondered in connection with the considerations of the nature of the development of polarity exemplified by the concept complex of your card number 5. Question 97.18. Questioner, do the symbols on the face of each of these little Carthages, such as the birds and the other symbols, have a meaning in this card that is of value in considering the archetypes? Could you answer that after making the instrument Kof? Ra, Kof, I am Ra. These symbols are letters and words much as your language would receive such an entablature. They are, to a great extent, enculturated by a people not of your generation. Let us, in the rough, suggest that the information written upon these Carthages be understood to be such as the phrase, and you shall be born again to eternal life.
Right, so here again, Ra is explaining what I explained earlier, that you have to realize that the people who wrote this were not of the mind that you have today. This was written a long time ago, okay? And so literally, right, the symbols are letters and words, much as your language would receive such an I don't know what that word is, attanature. I'm not sure exactly what that word is. They are, to a great extent, right, from people not of your generation, right? Let us in a rough suggest that the information written upon these card touches, okay, I think they're trying to say cartouches, but they're saying it wrong, cartouches, be understood to be such as the phrase, as you shall be born again into eternal life. So they're trying to show you, you have to realize that there are cartouches coming from Egypt, and the cartouches were usually like a person's name or something that is about that person, or a concept. And the concept here that they're referring to is that this cartouche was saying, and you shall be born to eternal life. So literally, by practicing and doing what you were seeing on the cards were teaching you how to balance your chakras so that you could then move forward in your development, to just like I talk about in my book, and I'm writing about more in this book that I'm currently writing, talking about different things, like, for instance, the letters to the churches in the Bible, in the Christian Bible, the New Testament, at the end, where you have the letters to the churches by Jesus or by God, that are in the last chapters, in the end times, or the enlightened times, the times of trouble, the times of tribulation, where they're talking about, everybody thinks they were physical letters to some church deity, some pope or some clergy, a priest or something in a church in a place, because they said to the Church of Philadelphia. So they immediately, let's just use that one, because they were like, well, there was a place called Philadelphia and there was a church there in the 1st or 2nd century. Why is it that Jesus would be writing that in a time when there was no church, about to churches in the future? Well, because Jesus is God and he knows the future. And of course, the word Philadelphia is a place, so he must have been referring to that. And I'm breaking that down in my new book, showing you how the names of the churches, first of all, there's 7 of them, 7 chakras. The names of the churches coincide with the chakras. And I show you that. I'm breaking that down. And that book will be out next year or the year after. By the time I get it done and published, we'll figure that out and we'll get it out there. But I'm talking about it now. So people will probably rush out and try and get it out there before I get it out there, because I talk about it too much. But it doesn't matter as long as it gets out there. So the churches, the letters to the churches in Revelation, the revelation of Jesus, is literally, the people didn't edit it out because they didn't understand it. They assumed it was a physical thing with physical churches in a physical time, that, let me put myself back up in full screen, that people would be looking for, because people who are in service to self always look for the land of milk and honey. It must be a place that we have to find, the fountain of youth. We must find that. It's a place where there's a drinking fountain where you drink and you'll live forever. We have to find that, and they go across the world looking for it for lifetimes, and they never find it, because all of the knowledge of the universe that you're looking for is within yourself. Okay. So you have to realize that in that, like the Revelations, the letters to the churches, if you look at them and you look up what does the red ray root chakra mean, what does it represent? What are the archetypes that it governs in the root chakra? What does that mean? And then you read that first letter to the first church and you look up the definition of what that word means, not the location of a church that was in that city 2,000 years ago, but what that word meant in either Yiddish, Hebrew, or Sanskrit at the time that was written. You'll find that had a definition that represented and does represent the red ray root chakra, the first letter to the first church. And if you then read it from that perspective of what does the red ray root chakra entail, and if I balance that in the spiritual way, what do I need to do? And if I balance that in a physical way, self-serving way, how would that look? And then when you read that letter to the church, you realize that where God is saying, if you do this, you're in my good graces. If you don't, I detest you and I don't like you and I'm angry at you because this is what you're doing. You realize balancing the chakra in service to others or balancing the chakra in service to self is what that is being told to you about. So it is literally no different than reading the Egyptian Book of the Dead, where there's this spell you have to cast to make it to the afterlife, to make it to heaven. Otherwise, if you don't know the name of the gatekeepers, 7 of them, by the way, 7 chakras, and if you don't know the true name of them and you don't know the spell to them, meaning you don't know what you need to know to balance that chakra, then you will not get through the gate and move to the next gate. So that book, that entire book from the Egyptians was about, and that spell was about balancing your chakras, taking that knowledge with you, and they would write these spells out and they would bury it with the person holding on to the scroll so that they would have that knowledge in the afterlife so they would make it to heaven. It's the same thing. It's balancing the chakras or not. And if you didn't know how to balance the chakras, you didn't get to go to heaven. So people don't realize that's what that stuff means, but it does. It means exactly that. And that's what you're supposed to ponder. And these are assisting you with these books, not the books, but the cards in these decks are supposed to be assisting you into opening up your mind so that you learn about those things, how to balance your chakras or how to read the archetypes and figure out how that is helping you govern you to help you make decisions so that you can then move forward in your journey to expand your consciousness and to move in an upward manner, either in service to self or in service to others, so that you can then ascend in one of those two categories.
Question 97.19. Questioner, thank you. I thought that the wings on top of the card might indicate the protection of the spirit over the process of evolution. Would Ra comment on that after having the instrument cough? Ra, cough, I am Ra. We shall end this session for we are having considerable difficulty in using the sympathetic nervous system in order to aid the instrument in providing sufficient of your air for its respiration. Therefore, we prematurely suggest ending this session. Is there any brief query before we leave this instrument? Question 97.20. Questioner, it's not necessary to answer this if you want to end right now for the instrument's benefit, but is there anything that we can do to improve the contact or make the instrument more comfortable? Answer, I am Ra. All is well. The support group functions well. It is suggested that the instrument be encouraged to take steps to recover completely from the distortion towards the aching of the throat and, to a lesser extent, the chest. There is no way in which we or you may remove the working which has been done. It simply must be removed by physical recovery of the normal distortion. This is not easy due to this instrument's tendency towards allergy. The alignments are being carefully considered. I am Ra. I leave you, my friends, glorying and rejoicing in the love and the light of the infinite Creator. Go forth, then, in the great dance, empowered by the peace of the one infinite Creator. Adonai.
Okay, that's session 97 of the Law of One. Session 98 will prime here in a second, and we'll start that. So that was September 15th, 1982. So now we're moving into session 98, September 24th, 1982, the Law of One. If it
I am Ra.
There it is.
I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. We communicate now. Question 98.1. Questioner, could you first please give me the condition of the instrument? Answer, I am Ra. The physical energy deficit has somewhat increased. The vital energy distortions are somewhat improved. Question 98.2. Questioner, we eliminated our meditation prior to the session. Would Ra comment on that? Answer, I am Ra. The purpose of preparation for a working is the purification of each entity involved with the working. The removal of a portion of this preparation has a value determined by the purity of each which takes part in the working has achieved without that particular aid. Question 98.3. Questioner, I had just taken a wild guess that possibly it was during that meditation prior to the working that was used by our fifth density, negative friend to create the allergic reactions and other reactions in the instrument. Was I correct in that assumption, or was I incorrect? Answer, I am Ra. This entity greets the instrument as close to the working in your space-time continuum as is practicable. The elimination of that preparation caused the fifth density entity to greet this instrument at this juncture of decision not to meditate. The greeting does not take what you would call a noticeable amount of your time. Question 98.4. Questioner, was the greeting as effective as it would have been if meditation had been done? Answer, I am Ra. Yes. Question 98.5. Questioner, I have a question from the instrument. It states, could Ra tell us what factors are allowing our fifth density, negative companion to be able to continue greeting the instrument in the throat area as well as with other unusual sensations such as dizziness, the smelling of orange blossoms, the feeling of stepping on imaginary creatures, and what can be done to lessen these greetings? Also, why do the greetings occur on walks? Answer, I am Ra. There are various portions of the query. We shall attempt answer to each. We tread close to the law of confusion, saved only by the awareness that given lack of information this instrument would, nonetheless, continue to offer its service. The working of your fifth density companion which still affects the instrument was, as we have stated, a potent working. The totality of those biases which offer to the instrument opportunities for increased vital and physical strength, shall we say, were touched by the working. The Blu-ray difficulties were not entirely at an end after the first asking. Again, this group experienced blockage rare for the group, that is, the Blu-ray blockage of unclear communication. By this means the efficacy of the working was reinforced. The potential of this working is significant. The physical exercising, the sacred music, the varieties of experience, and indeed simple social intercourse are jeopardized by a working which attempts to close the throat and the mouth. It is to be noted that there is also the potential for the loss of this contact. We suggest that the instrument's allergies create a continuous means whereby the distortion created by the magical working may be continued. As we have stated, it shall be necessary, in order to remove the working, to completely remove the distortion within the throat area caused by this working. The continuous aggravation of allergic reactions makes this challenging. The orange blossom is the odor which you may associate with the social memory complex of fifth density positive, which is known to you as sound vibration, Latwi. This entity was with the instrument as requested by the instrument. The odor was perceived due to the quite sensitive nature of the instrument due, again, to its, shall we say, acme in the 18-day cycle. The sensation of stepping upon the small animal and killing it was a greeting from your fifth density, negative companion also made possible by the above circumstance. As to the removal of the effects of the magical working, we may make two suggestions, one immediate and one general. Firstly, within the body of knowledge which those healers known among your peoples as medical doctors have is the use of harsh chemical substances which you call medicine. These substances almost invariably cause far more changes than are intended in the mind, body, spirit complex. However, in this instance the steroids or, alternately, the antibiotic family might be useful in the complete removal of the difficulty within which the working is still able to thrive.
Right, so you have to look at, let's start with that last portion of it, and then we'll go backwards from there. So even in the 1980s, there was already contemplation and no trust for pharmaceuticals and pharmaceutical companies giving you medicine that does more harm to you than good. So it's not something that's new. It's not something that people are just now starting to look at. However, you have to look at all of those things that were happening to Carla is the modus operandi of people who are evil, especially those people who are of a higher plane of evil. They will change what you see and perceive to, in some way scare you or mess with you. Like, for instance, in the movie Poltergeist, when one of the characters in the movie was eating fried chicken and the evil entity then projected into their mind that there was maggots all over the food that they were eating to gross them out. I actually had that happen to me in real life, not with chicken, but with another. I think it was either a steak or a piece of chicken from a barbecue. So that does happen to you. Sometimes people just think it's themselves doing it. They don't realize that it is a dark entity of some sort that is around, that's messing with you, that's attached to you, or the area that you're in, something like that. And it's literally anything that grosses you out or scares you. You give off an energy that they consume, that they take from you. So you have, like, say this, in this case, a fifth dimensional being, which is an assassin in service to self, that has been charged by someone to assassinate Carla, to keep her from channeling Ra, to get this information out to you. Okay. So the entity is now, doing things like that. And these are the things that Carla was asking about, were stepping on imaginary animals when she was walking, doing problems or creating problems with her throat and the throat chakra to get it out of balance so she can't talk properly, to, quite possibly lose her voice or get laryngitis or something, so she can't channel Ra to talk. And then you can see in the last two sessions, they're having problems and having to have her cough to clear her throat because she's having problems with phlegm on her larynx, on her vocal cords. Other things as well, where they were talking about there being pain that she was going through as well, different times when in the legs and in the arms. All of these things are orchestrated, not all the time. So you can't say that anything that happens to you came from that. So, you can't get paranoid and say, oh, I have a pain in my knee. It must be some evil entity messing with me. But sometimes it could be, depending on the circumstances that you're in. You have to constantly cleanse yourself when you go out in the world. And you come back home, you have to assume that you picked up negative energy from someone or something at some point. Even if you didn't, it's always good to then, you come home, you wash your hands if you pick up dog poop, right? So if you go outside and you're walking around outside and you touch something that's icky, you go wash your hands, wipe your feet, take your shoes off before you come in. Why? Because you might have something on there. You might have germs. You might have something so if you do that in a physical sense, why wouldn't you do that in a spiritual sense and cleanse yourself in a spiritual sense? Think about that. It becomes common sense, but everything is only common when everyone has it. So you can't say that, we joke about that, where people go, well, it's common sense. He doesn't have any common sense. Well, it's only common if everyone has it. So it's not actually common sense unless everyone has it. And if everyone doesn't have it, then it's not actually common. But it is sensical that you have to, if you will wipe your feet before you come in from mud or out of the rain, and you take off your wet coat or your umbrella, and you wring out the umbrella or shake out the umbrella before you come in the house, or you go through a mud room before you get into the regular house, why would you not do the same thing in a spiritual way to cleanse yourself of negative energy? This is something that I've been teaching since I was in my early 20s to people. Every time I have interaction with them, you physically clean yourself, you physically take a shower, you physically wash your clothes, you physically clean all of these things around you in your house. Why are you not doing it in the spiritual? You're doing nothing in your spiritual context. You're not cleansing yourself. You're not cleaning yourself. You're not washing yourself. Why? Why are we not doing those things? We need to be doing those things. We need to get into the practice of doing those things. Otherwise, you have things happen to you that you're unaware of, that you don't know, that are wreaking havoc in your life, like what's going on with Carla, right? You could have that happen to you if you're a light worker. If you're a light worker, we teach people that if you're a light worker, you have to assume that you have negativity trying to do harm to you, that you become a target, because you do at some point. when the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So the more the wheel squeaks, the more somebody wants to grease it so that it doesn't squeak anymore. So the same thing happens. The louder your message gets, or the more popular you get, the more people are going to try and take you down. Why? Because they're evil, because they don't like you, because you're doing good things. So therefore you become a target. You have to become aware of that. You have to realize that, and you have to take steps according to that. So you always have to cleanse yourself. You always have to do things to take care of yourself and to keep your energy up and to keep yourself safe and protected.
Of course, the allergies would persist after this course of medicine were ended, but the effects of the working would no longer come into play. The one you call Jerome might well be evading this somewhat unorthodox medical situation. As allergies are quite misunderstood by your orthodox healers, it would be inappropriate to subject the instrument to the services of your medical doctors, which find the amelioration of allergic effects to be connected with the intake of these same toxins in milder form. This, shall we say, treats the symptom. However, the changes offered to the body complex are quite inadvisable. The allergy may be seen to be the rejection upon a deep level of the mind complex of the environment of the mind-body-spirit complex. Thus the allergy may be seen in its pure form as the mental emotional distortion of the deeper self. The more general recommendation lies with one which does not wish to be identified. There is a code name prayer wheel. We suggest 10 treatments from this healer and further suggest a clear reading and subsequent following upon the part of the instrument of the priorities of allergy, especially to your foodstuffs. Lastly, the effects of the working become apparent upon the walking when the body complex has begun to exert itself to the point of increased respiration. Also a contributing factor is the number of your second density substances to which this instrument is allergic.
Right. So yeah, you have to pay attention to just about everything that's weird that way. No, Penny, as far as I know, the comments are on. Everybody's maybe just being quiet and not saying anything. If you guys are making comments and I don't seem to notice them, try to get my attention by saying something. Sometimes, depending on where you are on, say, Facebook, for whatever reason, the comments won't filter back into the studio here unless I'm on a different channel on Facebook. But for the most part, that stuff is supposed to do that. So if you're making a comment and I don't say anything to you, you should try messaging me directly to let me know that, because sometimes, depending on where you click on it in Facebook, they claim it's not their fault, but for some reason, when people share the law of one from the law of one to another group, sometimes that filter doesn't come into the studio. I don't know why, because it's supposed to. But Penny, so far as I know, nobody has said that to me recently. However, if you guys are out there and you say hello and I don't see that, right, then that's why. Yeah, Ree said, "Oh, allergies due to living in a place you don't want to be." Right. So yeah, I mean, well, allergies kind of help you in some sense, just like if you have allergies. And I've been teaching this forever too, because people know about this and you should look it up. If you have allergies to an area where you live, you should go and find a beekeeper, especially the European honeybee, and get the honey that is made in the area that you are living in, because the honey that's there is going to be made from the pollen that you're allergic to, from the specific plants that are around you that you're allergic to. And if you eat that, honey, you'll start to become less allergic to the pollen that you're allergic to. So we tell people that all the time. When you move to a new area and you find that you have whatever, allergies, hay fever, whatever, and you can go to a doctor and they can test you and you can find out what it is, or you can just go and find a beekeeper with local honey and get the honey from them and start eating it. And, not like, spoonful after spoonful after spoonful, but just put it into your diet. Instead of sugar, put honey in your food from the local beekeeper with the local area, and find out what the area is where that beekeeper is. And you'll find that your allergies will then subside. They'll start going away. It's just normal. Unless you have a food allergy, then that's different. But if you just have allergies to plants, grasses and trees and shrubs and that sort of stuff, that pollen is what the bees make the honey out of. So that's a natural remedy for allergies, no matter where you are around the world. Okay, let's continue here.
Question 98.6. Questioner, thank you. The second question is, Our oldest cat, Gandalf, has a growth near his spine. Is there anything that makes the surgical removal of this growth less appropriate than the surgical removal of the growth that we had performed a year ago last April? And would the most appropriate action on our part to aid his recovery be the visualization of light surrounding him during the surgery and the repeating of ritual phrases periodically while he is at the veterinarian's?
I like that their cat is named Gandalf. You have to remember that this is in a time before the movies were made. So that means that one of them or both of them, Carla and Dawn, were fans of Tolkien and read the Lord of the Rings sagas and named their cat Gandalf. Love it. I think that's hilarious.
Answer: I am Ra. No. There is no greater cause for caution than previously, and, yes, the phrases of which you speak shall aid the entity. Although this entity is, in body complex, old and, therefore, liable to danger from what you call your anesthetic, its mental, emotional, and spiritual distortions are such that it is strongly motivated to recover that it might once again rejoin the loved one. Keep in mind that this entity is harvestable third density. Question 98.7. Questioner: would you explain why you said, keep in mind that this entity is harvestable third density? And tell me if you have any other specific recommendations with respect to the proposed operation on the growth. Answer: I am Ra. We stated this in order to elucidate our use of the term spirit complex as applied to what might be considered a second density entity. The implications are that this entity shall have far more cause to abide and heal that it may seek the presence of the loved ones.
Right. So here, Ra's referring to the cat as a harvestable animal from the second density to move up to third density, meaning that cat Gandalf has learned what it needs to learn to become self-aware. Once an entity becomes self-aware as a second dimensional entity, when that life cycle ends, however it ends through whatever means, natural selection or whatever happens to the being, the cat, dog, tree, whatever it is, then the person will then cycle through the going to the Hall of Records, first the Hall of Healings, then the Hall of Records, then the place of contemplation and the place of creation, and then start designing their life. They will actually then come in to a family and be born as a human. That's the way it works. So people don't realize that when you look at animals, trees, everything is life. Everything is alive. Everything becomes sentient eventually. Everything becomes self-aware, and then becomes, in this case, on this planet, among a few other things, human. And then you start your journey of starting with I think, therefore I am. And then you are self-aware, and then you start your journey either in service to self or in service to others, and you start your ascension one way or the other.
Question 98.8. Questioner: is there any additional recommendation that Ra could make with respect to the proposed operation? Answer: I am Ra. No. Question 98.9. Questioner: I was wondering if I was correct in my assumption for the reason for the growth was a state of anger in the cat, Gandalf, because of the addition of the newer cats in his environment. Was I correct? Answer: I am Ra. The original cause of what you call cancer was the distortion caused by this event. The proximate cause of this growth is the nature of the distortion of the body cells which you call cancer. Question 98.10. Questioner: are there any other cancerous growths at this time in Gandalf? Answer: I am Ra. Yes. Question 98.11. Questioner: can we alleviate those, and, if so, how and where are they? Answer: I am Ra. None can be alleviated at this space-time nexus. One is located within the juncture of the right hip. Another, which is very small, is near the organ you call the liver. There are also small cell distortions under the, we may call it arm, to distinguish the upper appendages on both sides. Question 98.12. Questioner: is there anything that we can do to alleviate these problems that are other than surgical to help Gandalf? Answer: I am Ra. Continue in praise and thanksgiving, asking for the removal of these distortions. There are two possible outcomes. Firstly, the entity shall dwell with you in contentment until its physical vehicle holds it no more due to distortions caused by the cancerous cells. Secondly, the life path may become that which allows the healing. We do not infringe upon free will by examining this life path, although we may note the preponderance of life paths which use some distortion such as this to leave the physical body, which in this case is the orange ray body.
Right, so you have to realize at this point, is that something that is, conducive to most people's instinct is to try and save the cat and do whatever they can? Or, you have to then go, well, maybe we should put it out of its misery and let it move on, right? That's a decision for each individual person. Right now, getting back to reset, it doesn't help me. Right? So eating honey doesn't appear to help Reese with his allergies, which I don't know what the extent of your allergies are, but that does suck. If you can't get past those allergies, maybe make sure that the honey is being made from the local area that you're eating. But if it doesn't help, then it doesn't help. Then that's just not cool. I have some allergies that same thing. Doesn't help me in some respects and does in others. But there's other things that you can look into to figure that out. Okay, so let's continue here with the law of one. So that obviously a decision that they needed to do to make a decision about with Gandalf back then to figure out what they were going to do. And then they had another cat named Fairchild. And that's what they're going to be talking about right now.
Question 98.13. Questioner, does the cat, Fairchild, have any of these same type of problems? Answer, I am Ra. Not at this space-time nexus. Question 98.14. Questioner, was it necessary for the cat Gandalf to be a mind, body, spirit complex and harvestable third density to have the anger result in cancer? Answer, I am Ra. No. Question 98.15. Questioner, then any mind-body complex can develop cancer. Is this correct? Answer, I am Ra. This is correct. At this time we would break our routine by making an observation. We observe the following coincidence. Firstly, the congestion of this instrument's throat due to the flow of mucus caused by energized allergic reaction has, at this point, become such that we may safely predict the possibility vortex approaching certainty that within 1/2 of an hour we shall need to depart from this working. Secondly, as we noted the above, the sound vibration made by one of your sound vibration recording devices was audible to us. If this group desires, it may choose to have sessions which are brought to an ending soon after this sound vibration occurs. This decision would ensure the minimal distortions within the instrument towards the comfort within the throat until the effects of the magical working of your fifth density companion have been removed. Question 98.16. Questioner, that is perfectly fine with us. That noise occurs at the 45 minute time period since the tapes are 45 minutes on a side. I would just ask as the final question, then, if the new table that Jim has built for the appurtenances is satisfactory to hold them.
Jim, that's who ended up being the scribe. I knew they were going to cover it at some point. I couldn't think of the name of the scribe. Jim. All right, let's continue.
Since it will give us more room to walk around the bed, and is it better to leave it in its natural condition, or is it better to coat it with linseed oil, varnish, or paint? Answer, I am Ra. We view this appurtenance. It sings with joy. The pine vibrates in praise. Much investment of this working in wood has been done. It is acceptable. We may suggest it be left either as it is or rubbed with the oil, which also is easily magnetized and holds the profit vibration to a profound extent. Question 98.17. Questioner, I was wondering if this would be an appropriate time to end since the tape recorder clicked some time ago. Answer, I am Ra. This is a matter for your discrimination. The instrument remains open to our use, although, as we have noted, the physical distortions begin to mount. Question 98.18. Questioner, then we had better close to protect the instrument's physical energy, and I will ask if there is anything that we can do to improve the contact or to make the instrument more comfortable. Answer, I am Ra. All is well. We find your concerns appropriate. We leave you in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and in the peace of the One. Adonai.
Okay, so we'll let this play and we'll go on to the next session, which will be session 99. So this is 98, September 24th.
What if your website's success was only limited by one single thing? Privacy regulations.
Had to let that play, right? Session 99, November 18th,
I am Ra.
1982.
I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. We communicate now. Question 99.1. Questioner, would you please give me the condition of the instrument? Answer, I am Ra. This instrument's physical deficit continues but is the potential for the lessening due to the removal in your probable future of foodstuffs to which the instrument has significant allergy. The vital energy levels are somewhat lessened in the last asking but remain strong. The change in the mental emotional energy level is towards the distortion of the weakening of this complex. Question 99.2. Questioner, what are the foodstuffs that are creating this allergic reaction? Answer, I am Ra. That which you call the buttermilk, though appropriately used in the healing work undertaken for the throat and chest areas, is the substance to which the entity has allergy. Question 99.3. Questioner, the instrument asked if she could keep the small gold cross on while she is in one of these sessions. Will that cause any distortion in these workings? Answer, I am Ra. We scan the mental distortions of the instrument. Although the presence of the metallic substances, in general, not recommended in this instance, as we find those distortions weakening the mental emotional complex of the instrument due to its empathic distortions, the figure is specifically recommended for use by this instrument. We would request that should any strengthening be done to the chain, as we find it intended by this instrument, the strengthening links which symbolize eternity to this instrument be as high in purity or higher than the remainder of the device. In this nexus, that which this device represents to this instrument is a much-needed strengthener of the mental emotional patterns which have been much disrupted from the usual configuration of distortions. Question 99.4. Questioner, is there anything further that needs to be done by or for the instrument to remove the magical working or any of its after effects in her throat area by our fifth density, negative companion? Answer, I am Ra. No. Question 99.5. Questioner, finally, I have a question from Jim stating, for the last 2 weeks I have often found myself on the edge of anger and frustration, have had a nearly constant dull pain in the area of my indigo ray center, and have felt quite drained of energy. Would Ra comment on the source of these experiences and any thoughts or actions that might alleviate them? Answer, I am Ra. As in all distortions, the source is the limit of the viewpoint. We may, without serious infringement, suggest 3 courses of behavior which shall operate upon the distortion expressed. Firstly, it would be well for the scribe to engage, if not daily then as nearly so as possible, in a solitary strenuous activity which brings this entity to the true physical weariness. Further, although any activity may suffice, an activity chosen for its intended service to the harmony of the group would be quite efficacious. The second activity is some of your space-time and time-space taken by the entity directly or as nearly so as possible to the strenuous activity for solitary contemplation. Thirdly, the enthusiastic pursuit of the balancing and silent meditations cannot be deleted from the list of helpful activities for this entity. We may note that the great forte of the scribe is summed in the inadequate sound vibration complex, power. The flow of power, just as the flow of love or wisdom, is enabled not by the cherry asterisk conserver of its use but by the constant user. The physical manifestation of power being either constructive or destructive strenuous activity, the power field entity must needs exercise that manifestation. This entity experiences a distortion in the direction of an excess of stored energy. It is well to know the self and to guard and use those attributes which the self has provided for its learning and its service. Asterisk cherry, cautious, careful, wary, fastidious, particular, sparing, frugal, stingy. Question 99.6.
So you have to realize that all energies are potentiated by or for people who are both in service to self and in service to others to be interpreted or used in that respect by the individual if they're good or if they're evil. Okay? So if you're in service to others, you will then be more inclined to use all energies and knowledge from that angle and perspective. And then likewise, if you're self-serving, if you're evil, you'll do the same thing. So that's why, I refer back to that where Yoda said, the dark path is easier, more seductive, but once you start down the dark path forever, it will dominate your destiny. That's a warning that if you start doing that, whatever you start listening to, this is the Native American, which wolf do you feed? There are two wolves, and one wolf is the negative, evil wolf, and one wolf is the good, positive wolf. That is the negative, evil, the devil on your left shoulder, and the positive, good, the angel on your right shoulder. So whatever you feed, whichever you feed is what you become. So it is it is what you are. So if you are self-serving, you're going to be self-serving, and you're going to feed that. So you're going to be more egoic, and you're going to be more physically minded, living in the flesh, living in the physical, non-spiritual, and all about yourself and in love with yourself. Lower 3 chakras in service to self. If you are in service to others, you will then start to move up into the upper 3 chakras, which is the spiritual kindness, love, caring for not just the world, yourself, but of others. And that will be the positive path. Left-hand side path being negative, right-hand side path being positive, right? Shelley, welcome. Christy, welcome. So you have to realize that whichever you do, the potentiation of all energies in the universe at the 3rd dimensional level, where you are the first time self-aware, you're at the first time choosing to either be in service to self or in service to others, that all energies have the potential to go either way that you want to go with them, either in service to self or in service to others. And that's what Ra was talking about right there with the energies that is a potentiation. So all energy is potentiation. All of that, again, introspectively or externally spectrum, meaning subjective or objective. Subjective being a very physical plane oriented, self-serving oriented, or the astral plane, the spiritual plane being objective, being very internalized, looking within and also looking without at the same time. That determines your reality. So your perspective, your focus determines your reality. If you're self-serving, your reality becomes self-serving. If you're in service to others, your reality becomes in service to others. And you will use all of the energy that you gain and all of the knowledge that you gain for one of those two paths in your life. No matter what you pretend, because you can fool humans, no matter what you pretend, you can't fool the universe. The universe knows what path you're actually on. And but everything is a potential that is 50-50. All energies, all knowledge is given freely by the universe. All experience is given freely by the universe for you to then have, and your interpretation determines your reality. Let's continue.
Questioner, we now have an additional set of tarot images. Which of these two sets are closer to Ra's original intention? Answer, I am Ra. The principle which moves in accordance with the dynamics of teach learning with most efficiency is constancy. We could explore the archetypical mind using that set of images produced by the one known as Fathman, or we could use those which have been used. In point of fact, those which are being used have some subtleties which enrich the questioning. As we have said, this set of images is not that which we gave. This is not material. We could use any of a multitude of devised tarot sets. Although this must be at the discretion of the questioner, we suggest the maintaining of one and only one set of distorted images to be used for the querying, and note that the images you now use are good. Question 99.7. Questioner, the wings above card 5, I am guessing, have to do with the protection over the significator of the mind. I am guessing that they are a symbol of protection. Is this in any way correct? Answer, I am Ra. Let us say that you are not incorrect, but rather less than correct. The significator owns a covenant with the spirit, which it shall in some cases manifest through the thought and action of the adept. If there is protection in a promise, then you have chosen the correct sound vibration for the outstretched wings of spirit high above manifestation, yet draw the caged mind onward. Question 99.8. Questioner, thank you. In card number 6 I see the transformation of the mind, the male with crossed arms, representing transformation. The transformation is possible either toward the left or the right-hand path. The path is beckoned or led by the female, the potentiator. The one on the right has the serpent of wisdom at the brow and is fully clothed, the one on the left having less clothing and indicating that the potentiator is more concerned or attracted to the physical as the left-hand path is chosen, and more concerned and attracted to the mental as the right-hand path is chosen. The creature above points an arrow at the left-hand path, indicating that if this path is chosen, the chips, shall we say, will fall where they may, the path being unprotected as far as the activity of catalyst. The intellectual abilities of the chooser of the left-hand path would be the main guardian rather than the designed or built-in protection of the logos for the right-hand path. The entity firing the arrow seems to be a second density entity, which indicates that this catalyst could be produced by a lesser evolved source, you might say. Would Ra comment on these observations? Answer: I am Ra. We shall speak upon several aspects seriatim. Firstly, let us examine the crossed arms of the male who is to be transformed. What, O student, do you make of the crossing? What see you in this tangle? There is a creative point to be found in this element which was not discussed overmuch by the questioner. Let us now observe the evaluation of the two females. The observation that to the left-hand path moves the roughly physical and to the right-hand path the mental has a shallow correctness. There are deeper observations to be made concerning the relationship of the great sea of the unconscious mind to the conscious mind, which may fruitfully be pursued.
Right. So here again, the left-hand path being self-serving, right-hand path being in service to others. So you have to realize that. And then the potentiation of that and an interpretation for the individual. So if you had, that's the example of that being that if you have 100 people sitting in a room together and you show them a picture on a viewer screen or whatever in front of them, and you give them 1 minute to look at the image, and then you turn it off and you don't allow anyone to talk to each other, and you have them write down what that picture, the image was that they just saw, you're going to find that each individual is going to have focused on a different place unless the picture that you put up there was designed in a way to focus everyone's attention on something. You see this playing out in The Matrix, in the movie, if you saw the movie The Matrix, when took Neo into the program to show Neo about the guardians or the cops or the agents. And while he was in the program, he was walking around and everybody was walking down the street. And they were supposedly like in New York or LA. And there was people walking along, crossing the street and walking. There was one female blonde woman wearing a red dress that gets your attention as the viewer and gets Neo's attention. He sees this woman. She walks right up to in front of him, smiles at him and walks around him. And then he turns and follows looking at her. And then when he turns back around, he's faced with an agent pointing a gun directly at his head, less than 4 inches off of his head, about to pull the trigger and kill him. The whole purpose of that was to show that in fact, I talked about that program being created by one of the guys to do just that. So the misdirection and your reality is then created by what you're focused on. So the whole purpose of that was everybody was wearing almost the same color. If you watch that visually, it's a great psychological event to show this. And I'm sure that the Matrix is played in psych classes all over the world, especially a scene like that, where when he was walking, everybody is sort of blends in because they're all wearing almost the same color. And so it's just the minor differences of a person's face. And then all of a sudden, this tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman wearing a red dress stands out from the crowd and gets your attention. So that was a misdirection to get his attention away from what was going on, so that then they could show him that if you're not paying attention to everything because you get distracted by something, then there could be danger and you could be killed by a agent. How does that apply to reality, Leo? When we're thinking about that, it applies to reality because everything in this matrix is a distraction to keep you from your ascension, to keep you into this place. Your job in this place, when you become self-aware, is to then start waking up, if you are in service to others, to the reality that this reality is not what you think it is. That's why I entitled my book, The Reality About Reality, Returning to the Old Ways. And that's why the returning to the old ways isn't a returning to beliefs from 10,000 years ago or a way of life where people are like, well, we're not going to go back to Sharia law or this or that, or, the 1941 or 1875. And people think in a physical sense, and they try to apply that to a physical sense of going backwards in time in a physical way, so that people lose rights or something, or some other people become slaves again or something like that. Those are people who are self-serving, and they're not seeing the larger picture of being in service to others, and they're seeing things from a physical perspective only, and not from a spiritual perspective. Going backwards is getting back to the base roots of what all of these ascended masters throughout time were talking about, and that was a way of life that is ascension. That if you're in service to others, you're supposed to be on this path of enlightenment, to enlighten yourself more and more and more, and that is your function. If you're not self-serving, if you're self-serving, you just as physical plane. You want likes, clicks, money, power, fame, control. That is this physical place, and that's what you want. So you want to be a rock star or a movie star or a somebody that's an influencer on TikTok or one of these other platforms, because you want money, you want power, you want fame, you want everything that's physical. And the learning that this place distracts you and rewards you in a physical way is the first step of avoiding the trap. To quote Frank Miller, not Frank Miller, I'm sorry, to quote I can't think of his name right now. I'm thinking Frank Miller because I was thinking about Batman just a second ago, because I was going to use a reference there. So, to quote a book, Dune, by Frank Herbert, not Frank Miller, by Frank Herbert. In Dune, he says the first step in avoiding a trap is knowing of its existence. The same thing applies to everything in the universe. And this matrix that we're in here on this earth, or in third dimension, is just that. So everything is a distraction to keep you from learning the ascension, or looking within yourself, by distracting you in the physical plane of all the programming on television, everything that reading books and all of that are being controlled in a way to focus you away from that. And then there's people out there that are trying to help you to expand your consciousness in these same genres, in these same areas: television, radio, songs, poetry, books, movies, that are trying to expand your consciousness to show you these things. And a lot of what was going on in the Matrix was designed for that, even though the Matrix itself was then corrupted by these people to try and then morph your ideology and kind of keep you stuck in the Matrix itself, by giving you the knowledge that, oh yeah, there is a Matrix, but there's these evil robots that are using you as batteries. And then they dropped that whole concept and never went back to it after the end of the first movie. They ignored that storyline that the whole entire first movie had been telling you about, that robots had captured the human race, and that they were stuck in this computer program while their bodies were being sucked of the energy to run the robots. And then by the second movie, that entire platform disappeared from the timeline of the movies themselves as anything at all. And then it became a battle between good and evil, and the evil became Mr. Smith, who was an agent, all of a sudden became the devil to Neo's Jesus. And then that whole dynamic changed, and the Matrix movies took a completely different turn. It had nothing to do with what the first movie had to do with. Anybody who knows anything about spirituality realizes that. And then it was just make more money, make more money, make more money. But they tried to get back to that ideology at some point by pulling a little plot twists here and there. But the truth is, most of the movies after that were just money-making movies to get you to come back. And it was just this cat and mouse game between good and evil, which is okay, because it is the yin and the yang. So if you're aware of that and you see things from a larger perspective, then those movies are there. But everything is there to distract you. And at the same time, the same knowledge that is there is supposed to enlighten you at the exact same time. Your choice of what you see, getting back to the Matrix itself, when looking at the Matrix, there are far more things in there that you can see, like when Neo comes into the room and the kids are all sitting there and the one kid is trying to bend the spoon. And he says that it's not the spoon that bends, it's you that bends. That is very prophetic in the looking at the Matrix itself. If you're seeing it from a physical standpoint, yeah, you're inside of a computer program, or if you're looking at it from a spiritual standpoint, and that it is you that bends in reality, not the spoon itself. And that is a concept that will screw up your mind for a minute when you try to go there down that road, unless you're ready for that concept. And then you go, of course it is. So depending on where you are in your expansion of your consciousness, that will either be that's a computer program, and so it's but the you and the matrix and the physicality, and it's all an illusion, and that's all there is. And that's about as far as you'll get on the physical plane. And from a spiritual perspective, that takes on another entire meaning that's crazy. That's why they had him dress up. He was dressed up like a Tibetan monk with his bald head, wearing the same, pajamas, same clothing, and looking like the Dalai Lama. So because of that, that was the trigger for those people who were spiritual to see that there was a higher level and a higher meaning to what he was saying there, other than the computer program narrative of the physical. So then that would change your perspective, and it actually changed Neo's perspective, because he went and looked back on that moment many times during the course of the rest of the movies. So the information is there. Again, getting back to the potentiation, the information is there for you to see, and what you do with it will be determined by who you are or what you are, whether you're in service to self or in service to others. You will then interpret all things that you see in reality from one of those two slants, either evil or not evil, in service to self or in service to others. And that's the path that you will end up on, whichever that is, and that will start your ascension in those two perspectives. And that is where you will either look at more ways to control people and gain things from them: money, power, fame, glory, or how you can help people or do things that are in some way help people. That is the base building blocks of the universe itself. Okay, let me put this back up in full screen here. Actually, let me do a commercial once again for my book, and then we'll move on. So you got to pay the bills, right?
What is the reality about reality? Returning to the old ways. It is a comprehensive book about what is really going on here on this planet. It talks about the true spirituality that the controllers who think they own this planet have been keeping from you for thousands of years. It explains to you the knowledge that you gain from the universe itself when you live the way the prophets of the world throughout time told us how to live. Eat right, meditate, take care of yourself, treat others right. All the things they originally told us to do, but the controllers have removed from right in front of our eyes. The way to ascend to heaven. The reality about reality. Returning to the old ways. On sale worldwide, online now.
Remember, O student, that these images are not literal. They haunt rather than explicate. Many use the trunk and roots of mind as if that portion of mind were a badly used, prostituted entity. Then this entity gains from this great storehouse that which is rough, prostituted, and without great virtue. Those who turn to the deep mind, seeing it in the guise of the maiden, go forth to court it. The courtship has nothing of plunder in its semblance and may be protracted, yet the treasure gained by such careful courtship is great. The right hand and left hand transformations of the mind may be seen to differ by the attitude of the conscious mind towards its own resources as well as the resources of other selves. We now speak of that genie, or elemental, or mythic figure, culturally determined, which sends the arrow to the left-hand transformation. This arrow is not the arrow which kills, but rather that which, in its own way, protects. Those who choose separation, that being the quality most indicative of the left-hand path, are protected from other selves by a strength and sharpness equivalent to the degree of transformation which the mind has experienced in the negative sense. Those upon the right-hand path have no such protection against other selves, for upon that path the doughty seeker shall find many mirrors for reflection in each other self it encounters.
Right, so you have to see that right there. The left-hand path being self-serving is more violent right? So you're going to have a more violent attitude of protection, whereas the service to others path, you're not going to be thinking about violence. You're not going to be thinking about that form of protection. So you have to realize when people say what motivated that person to do those things, they're coming from a completely different standpoint of violence or level of violence, right? That a lot of people don't realize that love and hate, everybody thinks they're on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Love and hate, the difference between love and hate is the level of violence. That's it. Someone who hates someone, there is the only difference between being in love with someone or hating them and trying to kill them and murder them is the level of violence that is attached to the emotion that you feel for that person. If you are in love with someone, your level of violence is nil and none because you love them and you care about them and you don't want to see harm being done to them. If you are self-serving, you then can only love yourself. So the same emotion, and this is an actual thing, if you've ever taken a psychology class or beyond just the first, intro to psychology, you will see this as a thing that the level of violence then is there. There is a level of violence. So, but the emotion for hatred and obsession is the same emotion that you have for love towards a person. It's just that if you're in service to others, or if you love somebody and as much as you love yourself or more than you love yourself, the level of violence goes way down and you care for that person deeply. The other way around, if you hate someone, it's because you love yourself more than you love anyone else. Therefore, you loathe that person and want to do violence towards that person or wish ill upon them because you can only love yourself. So the emotion is still the same. The level of violence is different. And that's how that plays out. You can look that up. It's not something that I've interpreted or made up on my own. It's something that psychology actually teaches.
Question 99.9. Questioner, in the previous session you mentioned the use of the 45-minute interval of the tape recorders as a signal for the end of the session. Is this still the appropriate time? Answer, I am Ra. This is, of course, at the discretion of the questioner, for this instrument has some transferred energy and remains open as it has unfailingly done. However, the fragility of the instrument has been more and more appreciated by us. We, in the initial observations, saw the strength of will and overestimated greatly the recuperative abilities of the physical complex of this entity. Therefore, we may say that ending working at approximately this amount of energy expenditure, that is, some point soon following upon the sound vibration of which you speak, would be appropriate and, insofar as we may determine, may well extend the incarnational amount of your space-time which this instrument shall be able to offer to this contact. Question 99.10. Questioner, in that case I will just ask this short question as we terminate this session. I want to know if the logos of this system planned for the mating process as possibly depicted in card 6. I don't know if this is related to some type of DNA imprinting. In many second density creatures there seems to be some sort of imprinting that creates a lifetime mating relationship, and I was wondering if this was also carried into third density. Answer, I am Ra. There are some of your second density fauna which have instinctually imprinted monogamous mating processes. The third density physical vehicle, which is the basic incarnational tool of manifestation upon your planet, arouse from entities thusly imprinted, or the aforesaid being designed by the logos. The free will of third density entities is far stronger than the rather mild carryover from second density DNA encoding, and it is not part of the conscious nature of many of your mind, body, spirit complexes to be monogamous due to the exercise of free will.
You also have to realize that that some of that goes on, because some animals do that. They breed, they mate for life. There's a lot of different animals that do that they're discovering now more than they thought originally. And science couldn't prove or figure out what was going on with why they were doing that. That's being done for the purposes of expanding the consciousness of animals into that mating ritual that is a lifetime, lifetime mating, courtship and the like, because that comes into play. People who are in service to others seek that more than people who are in service to self. So that becomes a potentiation for people to then do that. Then you have other, to expand in that respect. in the consciousness, and then you have others that are completely different, where animals have a harem and there's one male who services all the females that they can dominate and dominate all the other males out of that area, and they become the dominant factor. That is a precursor to the same thing that happens in the physical plane. The difference being that, or in the third dimension, the difference being that because of free will, and this is what Ra is referring to here, because of free will, we have the choice to do whatever we want to do here. We have that carte blanche to do that, whatever it is that we want to do in that respect. So some people can come through, they can be in service to others, but yet not stay with one single partner. It doesn't mean that you're evil if you're not staying with one single partner for your entire existence. It just means that you chose not to do that, or you chose not to breed, or you chose not to whatever. You didn't want to have a family, you didn't want to have the responsibility or children, because you're in that developmental stage where that is completely different, and you're not nurturing that. You're not in that nurturing phase to learn that. So once you get to that portion of your beingness, then you will, at that point, want to learn that as a male or a female, as a human on this planet in third dimension. So it's there, and Ra didn't go into all those details to explain that, but it's there for the same purpose, for a potentiation, for second dimensional beings to experience either one or the other, or both, being mated for all of life or not. You know what I mean? So there are a lot that I don't know exactly how many animals do that compared to how many that don't. I've never really looked into that. However, I do know that just in my lifetime that, that's exponentially become more prevalent, where they've discovered more and more species of animals actually mate for life and stay together. So at first they thought that it was mostly just randomality and harem-like ideology, where the male who happened to be the strongest got all the women. And it wasn't until people started really paying attention that they realized that there was a family unit aspect to a lot of what goes on in second dimensional life forms that are the precursors to things that we play out in the third dimension, and the choices that we have here that help govern as a generalized major arcana or archetype that play out in the same way, because it's playing out in the lower beings, not because they are lower beings, but because they also have the same chakras that we have. So so they're starting to realize that the chaos is more ordered than they thought was, but chaos is still there. So it gets back to the reality just being weird. Like, was that Chandra that said that earlier? Reality is just weird because it is. It's just bizarre. It's literally there for us to do whatever we want with it. This matrix is designed to give us what we want, not what we need, but it actually gives us what we want. And then sometimes in that randomality-ness or the order-ness to the chaos, it gives us what we need, not what we want. And we can't determine when that changes and how. We can only affect the cause in some ways because we have that ability, if we realize the potential of that ability. And that's what you're supposed to be doing, is realizing that potential at some point in yourself by introspection, by being objective and realizing that you are the creator and that the universe is designed for you. So that's why I tell people all the time, this isn't happening to you, it's happening for you.
However, as has been noted, there are many signposts in the deep mind indicating to the alert adept the more efficient use of catalyst. As we have said, the logos of your peoples has a bias towards kindness. Question 99.11. Questioner, thank you. In closing, I would ask if there is anything that we can do to make the instrument more comfortable or to improve the contact. Answer, I am Ra. We note the relative discomfort of this group at this space-time and offer those previous statements made by Ra as possible aids to the regaining of the extraordinary harmony which this group has the capability of experiencing in a stable manner. We find the addition of the swirling waters to be helpful. The appurtenances are conscientiously aligned. We encourage the conscious strengthening of those invisible ribands which fly from the wrists of those who go forward to seek what you may call the Grail. All is well, my friends. We leave you in hopes that each may find true colors to fly in that great metaphysical quest, and urge each to urge each other in love, praise, and thanksgiving. I am Ra. We leave you in the love and light of the one infinite creator. Go forth rejoicing in the power and in the peace of the one glorious infinite creator. Adonai.
Okay, that was session 99 of the Law of One. That took place November 18th, 1982. Let's go ahead and start session 100 of the Law of One, probably after a commercial. Let's see. Nope. November 29th, 1982, session
I am
100.
Ra. I greet you, my friends, in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. We communicate now. Question 100.1. Questioner, could you first please give me the condition of the instrument? Answer, I am Ra. It is as previously stated with the exception of the vital energy distortion, which leans more towards strength-weakness than the last asking. Question 100.2. Questioner, the instrument asks if there is some problem with the swirling waters since she feels very dizzy after each application. Could Ra comment on that, please? Answer, I am Ra. Yes. Question 100.3. Questioner, would Ra please comment? Answer.
Gotta love snarky Raw. Would you comment on that, please? Yes. I love that. Would you please comment? Also, as a matter of fact, I love it.
I am Ra. As has been previously noted, the instrument has the propensity for attempting to exceed its limits. If one considers the metaphysical or time-space aspect of an incarnation, this is a fortunate and efficient use of catalyst, as the will is constantly being strengthened, and, further, if the limitations are exceeded in the service of others, the polarization is also most efficient. However, we perceive the query to speak to the space-time portion of incarnational experience, and in that framework would again ask the instrument to consider the value of martyrdom. The instrument may examine its range of reactions to the swirling waters. It will discover a correlation between it and other activity. When the so-called aerobic exercise is pursued, no less than 3 of your hours, and preferably 5 of your hours, should pass betwixt it and the swirling waters. When the walking has been accomplished, a period of no less than, we believe, 40 of your minutes must needs transpire before the swirling waters, and preferably twice that amount of your space-time. It is true that some greeting has encouraged the dizziness felt by the instrument. However, its source is largely the determination of the instrument to remain immersed in swirling waters past the period of space-time it may abide therein without exceeding its physical limits. Question 100.4. Questioner, thank you. To continue with the tarot, I would like to make the additional observation with respect to card number 6 that with the male's arms being crossed, if the female to his right pulls on his left hand, it would turn his entire body, and the same is true for the female on the left pulling on his right hand from the other side. This is my interpretation of what is meant by the tangle of the arms. The transformation, then, occurs by the pull which tends to turn the entity toward the left or the right-hand path. Would Ra comment on that observation? Answer, I am Ra. We shall. The concept of the pull towards mental polarity may well be examined in the light of what the student has already accreted concerning the nature of the conscious, exemplified by the male, and the unconscious, exemplified by the female. Indeed, both the prostituted and the virginal deep mind invite and await the reaching. In this image of transformation of mind, then, each of the females points the way it would go, but is not able to move, nor are the two female entities striving to do so. They are at rest. The conscious entity holds both and will turn itself one way or the other, or, potentially, backwards and forwards, rocking first one way then the other and not achieving the transformation. In order for the transformation of mind to occur, one principle governing the use of the deep mind must be abandoned. It is to be noted that the triangular shape formed by the shoulders and crossed elbows of consciousness is a shape to be associated with transformation. Indeed, you may see this shape echoed twice more in the image, each echo having its own ridges to add to the impact of this complex of concepts.
Right. So again, which you feed, right? Which decision that you make with the potentiation of the energy that you're receiving is a dual aspect, either in service to self, the left-hand path, or in service to others, the right-hand path. So here on that card, it's playing, that energy is playing out, or the potentiation of the knowledge and the choice. The person, the man in this perspective, or on this card, has the choice of which woman to follow, either the devil on the left shoulder and the angel on the right shoulder, the red wolf or the white wolf, or the dark wolf or the white wolf, and which one you feed is the direction that you're going to go. So both are pulling on him, the dual aspect of your ego and your conscience, not your consciousness, but your conscience, pulling you in one direction or the other, one being in service to others and one being in service to self. So the ego says, do this because you want to, and the conscience says, don't do that because that would be the wrong thing to do, to be that way. Or, steal this item. And the ego is saying, I want this item, I will take it. And then the conscience says, don't do that, that would be wrong. So you then have a choice. That's what the matrix job is to do, is to give you that choice. It is here to give you the potentiation of the energy, no matter what it is. And your choice determines your reality. Your focus determines your reality. You're either focused on yourself or you're focused on other people. And that's going to determine what your path is going to be. And that is being played out in this card as the major arcana here in the card, saying that you have that choice to make to determine what exactly is your next action or course of action.
Question 100.5. Questioner, thank you. We will probably return to this card in the next session with more observations after we consider Ra's comments. To make efficient use of our time at this time, I will make some notes with respect to card 7. First, the veil between the conscious and unconscious mind is removed. The veil, I assume, is the curtain at the top and is lifted. Even though this veil has been removed, the perception of intelligent infinity is still distorted by the beliefs and means of seeking of the seeker. Would Ra comment on that? Answer, I am Ra. As one observes the veil of the image of the great way of mind, it may be helpful to ideate using the framework of environment. The great way of mind, body, or spirit is intended to limn the milieu within which the work of mind, body, or spirit shall be placed. Thusly, the veil is shown both somewhat lifted and still present, since the work of mind and its transformation involves progressive lifting of the great veil betwixt the conscious and deep minds. The complete success of this attempt is not properly a portion of third density work and, more especially, third density mental processes. Question 100.6. Questioner, the fact that the veil is raised higher on the right-hand side indicates to me that the adept choosing the positive polarity would have greater success in penetrating the veil. Would Ra comment? Answer, I am Ra. This is a true statement if it is realized that the questioner speaks of potential success. Indeed, your third density experience is distorted or skewed so that the positive orientation has more aid than the so-called negative.
Right, so you have to realize that. Now, on this particular planet, in this particular matrix, the dynamic is 86% in service to others, 14% in service to self. Okay, that is the dynamic on this planet in third dimension. All places around the universe in third dimension have their own dynamic potentiation or percentage of in service to others and in service to self. So there are some planets that you would go to that are mostly evil people in service to self. It doesn't occur as much in the universe because when you have that many self-serving people, they start to eat each other. They start killing each other more and more and more. So the population stays a lot less, and then they either become 100% evil or they ended up destroying themselves, right? So the dynamic then changes, or they wink out of existence, and like Moldeck blew itself up. The Martians got themselves frozen in a catatonic state because of the when the balance gets out of balance, or the evil people become more greater than the good people, then it tends to become far more violent. Think about how violent the earth has been throughout time and how violent life has been here on earth. And it's only 14% of the population that is evil. Okay, 86%. It's so here the potentiation is more people in service to others than in service to self, right? So Ra saying that literally, the third density experience here, he says your third density experience is distorted or skewed, so that the positive orientation has more aid than the so-called negative. That's true in this place. Now think about that. The 1% of the 14% that are the ultra evil control 80 to 85%, if not more, of this entire matrix. They put themselves in that charge. So imagine if you just bumped up the dynamic of the most evil people, or the evil people, instead of being 14%, say it was 25%, it would be a completely different planet. Would you have more than 1% ruling, or would it still stay the same? Potentiation is there for both. But then that also gives rise to the potentiation of the people who are in service to others to realign in a stronger manifestation. But I don't want to get involved in that dynamic, because I could spend probably the rest of my life explaining that dynamic and the possibilities of every single scenario that you could come up with, because if you can think it, it's a thing, right? Okay, let's continue here with this line of questioning.
Question 100.7. Questioner: it would also seem to me that, since Ra stated in the last session that the limit of the viewpoint is the source of all distortions, the very nature of the service to self-distortions that create the left-hand path are a function of the veil. Therefore, they are dependent, you might say, to some degree on at least a partial continued veiling. Does this make any sense? Answer: I am Ra. There is the thread of logic in what you suppose. The polarities are both dependent upon a limited viewpoint. However, the negative polarity depends more heavily upon the illusory separation betwixt the self and all other mind, body, spirit complexes. The positive polarity attempts to see through the illusion to the creator in each mind, body, spirit complex, but for the greater part is concerned with behaviors and thoughts directed towards other selves in order to be of service. This attitude, in itself, is full of the stuff of your third density illusion.
Okay, so, right, you have to let's look at that. Let's break down that statement right there, that paragraph. Right, again, right, there's a thread of logic in what you suppose. The polarities are both dependent upon a limited viewpoint. However, the negative polarity depends more heavily upon the illusionary separation between the self and all other, right, and the self and all other mind, body, spirit complexes, meaning that the negative polarity depends more heavily upon the illusionary separation of self, of the individual. Being separated down here, we don't, until we get to know people, we don't start bonding with them until we trust them. Then we become more like each other. And when you're with somebody for a long period of time, if you're married to them or you're in love with them, you start answering each other's questions before you finish. You start saying, you start talking the same, you start thinking the same, why? Because you start becoming one. You start integrating yourself with this person because you love this person, you trust this person, they love you, they trust you, right? So the other, person who's self-serving can only love themselves. So they need the separation of self to survive. So they can't have other mind, body, spirit complexes, meaning other humans that are in service to others. They have to try and hold the knowledge that we're individuals. And that's what they do here in this matrix, is they try to get you to believe that this is all there is and that you are by yourself. And therefore we are in charge because we are the ones who have the power, and we know that we're in charge of you because we created you or whatever. And then you're alone and helpless. And they need to keep you separated from each other, and learning that, divided you fall and united you stand, right? That power together becomes more powerful. So people in service to others are far more powerful than people in service to self, because self-serving people don't like working with other self-serving people, or anyone for that matter, where people that are in service to others will work together. And because of that, you have more power because there's more of you that are controlling the matrix and creating things, right? So you have to realize that self-serving people depend on the illusionary ideology of individuality, and that you are alone and there is no God and there is no hope, and that you're a slave because they tell you you are. We are your creator. You are a slave. We own you. We own this place. There's nothing you can do about it. They need to convince you of that at all costs, because otherwise they lose their power, they lose their control, and they lose you being afraid of them.
Question 100.8. Questioner, the crown of 3 stars, we are guessing, would represent the balancing of the mind, body, and spirit. Is this in any way correct? Answer, I am Ra. This device is astrological in origin and the interpretation given somewhat confusing. We deal, in this image, with the environment of mind. It is perhaps appropriate to release the starry crown from its stricture. Question 100.9. Questioner, the small black or russet and white entities have changed so that they now appear to be sphinxes, which we are assuming means that the catalyst has been mastered. I am also assuming that they act as the power that moves the chariot depicted here, so this mastery enables the mind in its transformation to become mobile, unlike it was prior to this mastery, locked as it was within the illusion. Would Ra comment? Answer, I am Ra. Firstly, we ask that the student consider the Great Way not as the culmination of a series of 7 activities or functions, but as a far more clearly delineated image of the environment within which the mind, body, or spiritual function. Therefore, the culturally determined creatures called sphinxes do not indicate mastery over catalyst. The second supposition, that of placing the creatures as the movers of the chariot of mind, has far more virtue. You may connote the concept of time to the image of the Sphinx. The mental and mental-emotional complex ripens and moves and is transformed in time.
Right. So again, you have to realize that metaphors, again, like I was talking about earlier on, where just because they drew a picture of or made a statue of an entity or a person that looks bipedal and that is human, that has wings, doesn't mean that they actually had wings on their back and that they flew around. You have to look at what were they trying to say back then. They were drawing pictures. So you know the saying, a picture has 1,000 words, right? Every picture has 1,000 words. So they were trying to show you something with what they had at the time. So instead of carving on a piece of stone or a tablet or writing on a parchment, this long drawn out thing, they were trying to show you and depict things in a physical way with pictures, and so that there were symbols involved in the pictures, like you see Thoth the Atlantean with the bird head, the Houthi bird head, and you see other snake heads and things like that. So the symbology was the imagery that they were using, and the people back then understood how to interpret that, the ones who were educated. This is why in the Bibles, you hear in the Bibles as you're reading, let him who hath understanding reckon. Say the number of the beast for the number of the beast. Let him who has the ears to hear or the eyes to see. That is saying, that's a highlight saying to you, those of people who are educated, pay attention to what is going on here. It's a highlight without a highlighter. We didn't have highlighters. They didn't have highlighters back then. So they would say words, and then the words that came after that meant something more than normal, meaning, pay attention here, these words that are coming out of the pages now are metaphoric in nature. Well, they had to do something in the physical when they were carving statues or when they were drawing pictures. They were using metaphors to get as much of the interpretation of what they saw or what they were trying to show you in visual, and they were leaving it behind for other people who were like-minded, like them in ascension, that they would see those things and realize it. But the problem became the people who were finding those things were not in any way enlightened, and they were finding them and they were interpreting them a completely different way. I remember when I was younger, I'm watching documentaries, and they were, let's say, over at Machu Picchu, and they would have this arena that was there, and they immediately said this was completely done for religious practices. And I looked at that and said, how do you know that? How do you know that wasn't just a stadium that they played football in? How do you know that wasn't an entertainment? That had nothing to do with religion at all. They always claimed that everything in every documentary and everything that they found had to do with religious ceremonies where they were sacrificing people, and that's what they told everyone. And I remember saying that's just not true. That's not what everybody's doing. If that were true, we would be doing the same thing now that they were doing then. Oh no, we're completely different now than those people then. We're a civilized group of people. And we don't do those things, but they did. But yet the further back you go, in the times like going to the Romans and seeing the Roman Colosseum, well, they murdered people in there. And so we do the same thing. We just reenact it on television in movies. We do the same thing that they did. They didn't have movies, so they actually did it in real life. Do you understand that? So you have to look at things from the perspective of the people that were there. They gave entertainment where people were actually getting hurt. We don't have to do that anymore because we have movies. We can then enact it and pretend. Once those things started happening where people were reenacting things and they were actors doing it, then all of a sudden people stopped killing people for entertainment and they started watching actors on stage doing things where they were acting like they got killed. And that turned into eventually movies. And that has gone to where we are now. Video games, the same thing. Before all of those things, they didn't have anything to do those things. So they ended up doing that kind of thing, killing people and the like. It doesn't mean they were barbaric. It is what they did at the time. And that was the way of life then. That's how things worked. People lived a lot shorter. It was completely different. To understand what they were doing, again, you have to go back and look at the culture at the time. There are things that went on in the time of the Romans that are now would be illegal now. There are things that would be immoral happening now. Depending on where you are in the world, culturally, things are, you eat a hamburger. There are countries that animal is a very important religious icon and you don't kill and eat beef. And then you have other religions, if you eat pork, they are just, will not eat pork because it is an affront to God. There are cultures that'll eat a cat and a dog. If you're from a Western European culture that's foreign to you, in fact, that's hideous and you wouldn't do it. Yet you'll eat pig. And to other people around the world, the ones that you say are offensive because they eat a cat and a dog think that you're hideous and that you're dirty and that you're evil because you ate a pig or a cow. Okay, so perspective is determining the reality of people, and you're trying to apply your perspective to the world and thinking that everybody thinks like you and has the same points of view that you do and the same political ideology that you do. And you don't realize that that's not the case. So that's what gets people into trouble, but it also allows for people to get into trouble. So there's that yin and the yang. However, you have to realize that the only way that you can truly learn about something is to learn about it from the perspective of the writer or the time period, not based on you now. Because there was a time in Central America where if crops weren't doing good, they would take another human and cut their heart out and bleed them and scatter the blood all over the fields and cook the heart and eat it. And there was cultures that still to this day take the placenta out of a female when they clean her up after birth and they cook it and eat it. In some cultures, people would puke for me just saying that to you. In other cultures, that's a delicacy because it's the renewal of life. And if you look at it from a standpoint of health perspective, there are all kinds of stem cells in that placenta. There are all kinds of stem cells in that afterbirth. There are all kinds of stem cells in there that would actually change your DNA for the better because it's the building blocks of the universe. How did these people know that? Where did they figure that out? Why did they figure that out? Oh, they were barbaric. They didn't know what they were talking about. Then why is it that science today is discovering things that people knew 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 years ago, and we are discovering that they knew something that we had never fathomed that they would know or that they could know, because we are so high and mighty with our technology that we rely on, that we think only someone who has developed this technology could know it. And then we rediscover something and realize, wait a minute, this has been staring me in the face for all of my life. And when you look back on things, you find out that somebody 5,000 years ago knew the answer that you think you just discovered. And we just only found that out as a society now, and that somebody already had that symbol drawn or that picture drawn or that concept drawn. And we didn't even realize what that meant until we discovered it by using a computer or x-rays or something, looking at it with a microscope. How could these people from 5,000 years ago have known this? But they did. So how come we didn't get that knowledge passed on to us? But we did, because it's still there. Why did we not acknowledge it? Because we were looking in the wrong place and asking the wrong questions. So that means at some point that knowledge that is right in front of our eyes was either forgotten or removed from the minds of the people and not taught to them. So you have to look at what was that scenario and when it happened. That's why in my book, the Reality About Reality, Returning to the Old Ways, right here behind me, I talk about that. There's a definitive timeline where there was a shift in the minds and the perspective of the evil people on this earth to take certain knowledges away from the people here, even though they couldn't eradicate it from all of time. And there are clues that are right in front of your eyes on this information that is there for you to see, if you have the mind to see it or the eyes to read, or the other way around, or the ears to hear. It's right there in front of your eyes and you don't know it till you do. And once you know it, then you look around once you become awake, and all of a sudden you start gaining this knowledge and it's there and you're not understanding why you can't wake up yet. And then one day you go, wow, I think I was awake for a long time. I didn't know that I was awake. And then you look around and that's that moment where Neo saw the ones and the zeros and the zeros and the ones, or I think they were using Japanese writing that was a laundry list or something in the movie that everybody thought was the binary code of the computer of the aliens. But you see the Matrix for what it is, and all of a sudden you can't unsee it. And you realize it's in everything, and it's right there in front of everybody's eyes constantly. And you don't know it until you know it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it because you can't unlearn that knowledge. But then you turn around, you start looking at people and you try to tell them what you see, and they look at you like you're blue or like you're insane because they're not ready to see it. They can't see it. So you have to realize that. Okay, I think we're going to stop here and then we'll move on because it is getting closer to 6 p.m. And I am going to have to get my mother in to bathe her. And Brooke is over here cooking food. So I don't know when we're going to eat, but I need to be done and ready to eat when she decides that we're going to eat, because I'm not having to cook on Friday because Brooke is here. Okay, so I will see you guys either in the chat. I'm going to try and be back. No, I'm not going to be back next Wednesday for the Zoom call on that day either, because I believe that's the day that Brooke is going to be going home to Australia. So I'm not going to be in the mood to be on a Zoom call with you guys. No offense to anyone, but I'm going to be sad for a while until I can get all of my affairs in order and follow Brooke to Australia. But I will be back next Friday for the Law of One. So I love you guys, and I will see you guys either in the chat or I'll see you guys next Friday. And those of you listening around the world, you guys aren't in the chat. If you're on the MP3 broadcast, you might be in the chat. But if you're not, contact one of us and we can get you into the chat for the Law of One on Messenger, the Law of One class chat, because there is a couple of them out there that are just the Law of One, and they're really big, and they have a whole thousands of people in them talking 24 hours a day. This is a smaller group where we talk about the Law of One, we talk about spirituality, answer each other's questions, give you a place where you can ask questions, and we do calls on Messenger where everybody can ask questions and talk on impromptu. Different people in the chat, like Hawkeye, Rick is doing that. Cassie's doing that. I don't know who else is doing that, guys. You'll have to forgive me for not realizing who starts these calls, but you guys are doing that all the time on your own in there, which is good because everybody's hanging out, helping each other. So if you have questions that you want to ask, get a hold of us on Messenger in the Law of One class chat. We'll get you into that chat, or get a hold of one of us personally, myself, Cassie, Rick, Brooke, Penny, Denise, one of us that I don't know who else is here, Reese, if he's still here. Get a hold of one of the people that I know is already in that class chat. have them add you to that. We'll get you guys in there. You guys can ask questions. So those of you around the world listening on the MP3 broadcast, if you do have questions out there, you're trying to figure out an avenue to contact myself or somebody else to answer your questions, find us. If you can't find us on Messenger, whatever platform that you're on right here, you can send me a message back through the chain. You can go to the podbean.com and look up Orion Rising there. You can go to www.orionrising.podbean.com. Find me there and send me a message. You can find me on YouTube, under my name. You can find the Orion Rising shows that I'm doing there. You can email me there or message me there, or look my name up on the other platforms. You'll see that it's my picture that I'm posting things. I haven't posted, I think, really since Brooke has been here. I've been doing a lot of things, helping. She's been helping me. We're trying to prepare my mother and the house and all the stuff for the next phase of our lives. And that's kept me away from posting as much as I normally would. I used to post every night, but I'm still paying attention to that. So you guys can send me a message from around the world on any of the platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, where I do post those reels that I create, a short, whatever it's called. You can message me through one of those and ask me questions if you want. And I do try to answer. I look at that stuff daily, and I do try to answer those questions. Or you can find me, you can email me at Olauff, OLAUFF, at yahoo.com. You can send that email to me on that and ask questions, and I will try to get back with you. I also work with people. We can talk about that if you guys want to work with me and have me work with you independently. I do that, and I'll be doing that going forward as well. So I love you guys. Have a great night. This has been Orion Rising. I am your host, Leonard O'Neill. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good morrow, depending on where in the world you are tuning into this show. I love you guys. I'll see you guys later.